Chapter 53, Chapter XLIX, When They Come Knocking. It had been 2 months since Prince Mors Martell led the daring rescue of Eddard Stark from the very heart of King's Landing. Word of the feat spread swiftly across Westeros, followed by the inevitable truth: the Stepstones and by extension, Dorne had thrown in with the rebellion. After all, what else was an all-out rescue of the king's prisoner if not open defiance? In his wrath, King Aerys burned his master of laws, Lord Simon Stanton of Rook's Rest, blaming him for the chaos in the capital and for allowing Mors to break in and spirit Stark away almost unopposed. He then commanded his loyalists to bring both Dorne and the Stepstones to heel without delay. Mors's renown only grew greater when news spread that he had bested the legendary Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Sir Gerald Hightower, during the rescue. The war meanwhile surged on with unexpected turns. As anticipated, the North wasted no time, Lord Rickard Stark marching 25,000 men south through Moat Cailin. In the Riverlands, Lord Hoster Tully declared for the rebels, sealing his alliance by betrothing his daughter Lisa to Robert Baratheon's younger brother, Stannis, to be wed once she was of age at 14. Yet Hoster went further, proclaiming openly that Robert Baratheon should be king, citing his descent through Princess Rhaelle Targaryen. When Rickard Stark heard of this, he embraced the claim at once, eager to be father-in-law to a king. Lord Denys Arryn, though less supportive, agreed the Targaryen line had to end. With their banners raised, the Riverlands added another 15,000 men to the rebel host, including the captured Derry and Went levies who bent the knee. Before the northern host could link with its allies, disaster struck. With the Westerlands joining the Crownlands and Reach, the royalist host moved to meet the rebels at High Heart. There, the combined brilliance of Lord Tywin Lannister, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, and Lord Randyll Tarly broke the rebels in their first great defeat, driving them back toward River Run. Only the timely arrival of the fresh northern host prevented the war from ending outright. Complicating matters further, the Ironborn seized their chance for plunder. Though Lord Quellan Greyjoy had long held back from the war, his eldest sons pressed him that the royal faction held the overwhelming advantage, and that to delay was to risk losing all hope of spoils. Yielding, he led 100 longships and 10,000 men into the Riverlands, joined by Balon, Victarion, and Euron, each commanding their own squadrons. Their raids along Ironman's Bay in the Riverlands spread fire and terror, plunging both regions into chaos. This forced the rebels to divide their strength, torn between answering the Ironborn raids and bracing against the advancing royal host. In the south, Lord Mace Tyrell's 21,000-strong army abandoned the siege of Storm's End, turning back toward the Reach in search of worthier glory or whatever notion occupied Mace's mind. The royal fleet left behind only a token force to cut off any succor that might reach the garrison within. Eddard Stark remained at Sunfort, recovering under Prince Mors's watchful care and the skilled attention of Maester Orwine. In the weeks that followed, he forged bonds with Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Garth Hightower, and much to his own surprise with Prince Oberyn Martell whenever he was present. Most of all, Ned found himself drawn to the company of Sir Barristan Selmy, whose tales of past wars, valour, and chivalry stirred both admiration and quiet reflection in him. As his strength returned, he joined them in the yard, sparring and training to rebuild his vigour. The sessions further honed his already notable skill with sword and shield, sharpening the instincts that had long begun to set him apart. Current forces engaged: Royal faction, 75k. Opposition faction, 58k. End of 279 AC. Sunfort Training Grounds, the Stepstones. Morning light spilled across the training grounds of Sunfort, catching on steel and spear points. Mors stood with Sir Karen Toland and Sir Garth Hightower, watching the sparring yard slowly fill. Sir Barristan Selmy arrived next, having just finished putting Sir Darrow through a brutal round, Darrow now groaning in the dirt. Barristan had recently agreed to serve as Master-at-Arms for Prince Mors, declaring the Eclipse Guard too lacking to properly perform their duties. The result had been relentless training from dawn till dusk. Darrow, Horan, and Cale had only just been knighted after their last mission, but knighthood had bought them no mercy. Even Mors trained undersell me now. Though Baristan judged him the finest warrior he had ever seen, he noted that Mors relied too heavily on overwhelming strength, speed, and stamina. Though unmatched, against sheer skill, he still stood just short of Baristan and Arthur. So Mors took the challenge eagerly, refining his technique with each clash, and to Baristan's alarm, he was improving fast. Today, however, all eyes turned to the yard's center. At last recovered, Eddard Stark stood opposite Sir Arthur Dane, shield and long sword in hand. "I've been hoping for this," Ned said, anticipation in his voice. "Since hearing of you from my brother, watching from the sidelines has been torment." Arthur smiled lightly. "Then let us spar properly. Now that you're well, show me your steel." He lifted his blade and nodded. "Begin when ready, Eddard." "Ned," Stark added quickly. "Call me Ned." Arthur's smile widened. "Very well, Ned." They met in a clash of steel. Ned thrust, Arthur parried with his shield and countered with a cut, which Ned blocked before slashing back. Arthur shifted, deflecting with his shield and slipping around to kick Ned lightly in the back, staggering him. "That would have been a wound at best," Arthur said calmly. "At worst, death." Again. Ned came harder this time, shield smashing against Arthur's, sword cutting high. Arthur met each stroke with patient precision, footwork perfect, forcing Ned onto the back foot but letting him learn in the dance. When Ned thrust again, Arthur caught his sword hand on his shield, shoved Ned's shield aside, and swept his legs in the same motion. Ned hit the dirt hard, Arthur's sword at his throat before he could recover. "I yield," Ned breathed, exasperated but smiling as Arthur offered him a hand up. From the sidelines, Mors clapped lightly. "Not bad, Ned. You've truly regained your strength." Ned answered with a grin. "And my skill sharpens with every spar." "Then use your time here well," Mors said, tone wry. "I imagine you're eager to rejoin your father and brothers in the Riverlands." Ned nodded, more solemn now. "This chance, to train with Sir Baristan, Sir Arthur, even you, it seems you have a fighting holy ground here." "I'll leave within the week." "Tell me when," Mors replied. "Getting you there will take some doing." The sparring continued for another hour before it was broken. Sir Jeremy Norwich strode into the yard, his expression grave. "My prince," he called, "a raven from Old Town." "Urgent." At the mention of Old Town, Garth Hightower straightened sharply. The yard fell quiet as Mors took the letter and scanned the parchment. His brows furrowed. "Did you inform Doran?" Mors asked. Jeremy shook his head. "I came straight here." "I understand." "Do so now," Mors ordered. Jeremy bowed and jogged off. Turning to the others, Mors raised his voice. "War has come. The Reach marches on Dorne. 20,000 at least, through the Prince's Pass. Mace Tyrell himself leads them." Faces hardened, a mix of dread and anticipation. Karen spoke first. "My prince, will we march as well?" Mors said without hesitation. "Dorne and the stepstones rise and fall together. We depart at dawn." Karen, ready the men. "Darrow, tell Davin to prepare the fleet." "Garth, find Maester Orwine and send word to Bedwick, Idrin, and Talor. With us gone, they must guard against Lys and Tyrosh twice as hard." Karen, Darrow, and Garth sprinted off at once. Mors turned to the rest. "Prepare yourselves. Sir Baristan, my family's safety rests with you." Baristan inclined his head solemnly. With that, the training yard scattered swords sheathed, plans unfolding. By morning, war would be upon them. Later that night, Mors and Ashura sat on the patio of their chamber, gazing at the clear night sky. The full moon gleamed bright, stars strewn like jewels across the dark, giving the world an almost otherworldly calm. The day had been long. Mors had spent it finalizing deployment plans with his council, ensuring the safety of Ashura, Elia, and Malara while he prepared for war. Both Ashura and Elia, heavy with child 8 and 7 moons along, needed the security more than ever. Tonight, he and Ashura shared a pot of honey lemon balm tea, her favored drink of late, the gentle brew replacing wine these past months. They drank in silence, savoring both the night air and each other's company. At last, Ashura broke the quiet. "Sonny, must you go? Can't Doran and Oberyn handle it?" Mors's brow furrowed as he kept his eyes on the stars. After a pause, he answered. "They could. But against the Reach, we can't afford hesitation. If the fighting drags, with our shared history, neutral Reachmen lords might flock to Tyrell's banner to settle past grievances. Only a swift, decisive defeat will stop them. Dorne must guard 2 passes, and though the Stoneway is treacherous enough to hold with fewer men, it still needs strength. That leaves the Prince's Pass, and Manfrey guards the Stoneway already." Ashura nodded in understanding, but her expression softened into sadness. "Why must there be war?" The question hung heavy in the night. Mors sighed. Rhetorical though it was, he still chose to answer. "No one truly wants war. Yet too many profit from it. War breaks the order of things, letting the ambitious rebuild it to their liking. Look at the rebels, they haven't won, yet already cry for Robert as king. All with their own interests in mind. Even Doran could have resisted Elia's marriage to Rhaegar, but ambition blinded him too." He shook his head. He went on, quieter. "If the dragons still lived, peace could be kept even if through fear. Or with a ruler like Jaehaerys, who used power to unite instead of destroy." Ashura fell silent, sipping her tea. Finally she whispered, "Just be careful. Don't throw yourself into needless danger." Mors gave a wry thought. "That's easier said than done," but only said aloud, "I'll come back to you. I always will." He turned back to the sky. "The night reminds me of you. When I'm away, I'll have it to keep you close." Ashura smirked. "What's that word you use?" "Ah, corny. That's what that was." They laughed softly, letting the moment linger. A sudden pounding at the door cut through their peace. "Morsi! Shara! Open up!" Malara's voice called, urgent. Mors and Ashura exchanged a look. He rose quickly, opening the door to find Malara barefoot in her sleepwear, clutching the glass candle to her chest like a doll. Her eyes were wide, breath quick. "They're coming," she said, rushing inside. "They're coming down." Mors's gaze darted to the candle. "Malara, who's coming?" She paused, frowning in thought. I don't know. But I saw ships. Lots of them." "Ships?" Mors repeated. "Coming down, from the narrow sea." "I think so. Do you want to see?" "Yes," Mors said, voice steady. "Guide me." Malara sat cross-legged on the floor, setting the glass candle before her. Mors joined, and together they touched it. At once the world shifted. But they seemed to pause. Malara sat cross-legged on the floor, the glass candle before her. Mors joined, and together they touched it. The world shifted. They hovered above Sunfort, but the vision held still, unmoving. "Malara." Mors reached out in concern. Which way was it?" Malara's voice wavered in his mind, confused, as though she'd lost track of her bearings. "I forgot which way I was looking before." Mors nearly groaned, but steadied himself. "You said they were coming down. That means north, are right?" "Oh, okay." Malara chirped, as if she wasn't just lost a moment ago. The vision snapped back into motion. They swept swiftly across the dark waters until eventually a vast fleet surged into view. "I'll take control," Mors murmured, narrowing his focus. Black hulls packed the sea, banners whipping faintly in the night wind. Valyrian sea horses, Targaryen dragons. The royal fleet. There seems to be roughly about 200 ships. That's Lord Lysarin Velaryon, he's commanding. His breath left him in a grim sigh. They're coming straight down, we are likely the target. Talk about bad timing, fortunately we were already mustering. The vision broke. Mors rubbed his temples and rose to his feet. The royal fleet is moving. We are the target. He strode to the door, calling to the guard outside. Fetch Jeremy. Tell him to summon the council, we meet in 30 minutes. Yes, my prince, the guard said, hurrying off. Mors turned back, already stripping off his robe for battle garb. We won't be sleeping tonight. Malara, stay with Ashura. Malara snapped into a clumsy salute. Captain. Ashura laughed, covering her mouth, while Mors allowed himself a faint smile. He bent to kiss her gently. Malara immediately puckered her lips in mock expectation. Mors rolled his eyes but leaned down to brush her brow with a quick kiss. She gave an exaggerated swoon, cheeks coloring as if they'd shared some scandalous secret. Bad Morsi, she whispered, voice dripping with mischief. Mors rolled his eyes, and made for the door. Rest well. I'll handle the rest. And with that, he was gone. The next morning, the port thrummed with life. Men clambered aboard ships, sails were checked, ropes tightened, and formations set. The fleet of the Stepstones stood ready to face the royal fleet. Ravens had already been sent to Dorne with news of this last-minute shift. Mors had asked for their fleet to deploy as well, but there was no time to wait. Sir Karen Toland and Sir Daven Quar stood at his side, reporting. 4,000 men embarked, Karen said. The warships are near capacity. Another 1,000 remain here with the transports. They'll join us when we engage the Reach in the Prince's Pass once we've won clear waters. The fleet is ready to sail at your word, my prince, Daven added. 125 warships. Messages have gone to Commanders Bedwick Euler, Idrinco, and Talor Sand. With luck, they'll reach them before any other variables come into play. Mors looked over the bustling port. Families said hasty farewells, children wept into their mothers' skirts, wives clung to their husbands with desperate kisses. War made little room for mercy. A carriage approached from Sunfort. Mors knew who it would be and moved to meet them. Ashura stepped down first, Elia following with care. Malara, Alyssa, Naeris, and Sienna trailed behind. Ashura fell into Mors's arms and clung tightly. Come back quickly, she murmured, her lips curling into a sly smirk. If you do, I'll reward you. Mors raised a brow at the tease but only smiled, kissing her. I will. I promise you. Elia embraced him next. Brother, take care of yourself. Show them what it means to cross the Martells. Mors chuckled. Now that you've said that, I suppose I have no choice. She smacked his shoulder lightly but smiled as she stepped back. Then Malara hurled herself at him like a rocket. Mors. Take me with you. I want to see you beat them. He hugged her back, already used to her eccentricities, but leaned close to whisper. Stay here. Keep watch with Sienna. We have enemies in every shadow. Find the spies, and keep your eyes on Lys and Tyrosh. I can only trust you with this. Malara blinked, wide-eyed at the weight of his words. She nodded firmly. Don't worry, Morsi. I'll protect our family. She flexed her skinny arms in mock strength. Mors's chest tightened. Our family. She had become part of them, body and soul. He turned to Alyssa, Naeris, and Sienna. They saluted. My prince. Help Jeremy and the others while I'm gone. Sienna heed Malara. If she discovers something, take it seriously. By your will, my prince, Sienna answered crisply. As Mors turned to leave, Alyssa's voice called out, hesitant. Prince Mors. He paused, puzzled, as she stepped forward. She hugged him quickly before snapping back into a formal salute. Be safe. I will protect Princess Elia and Princess Ishara. Though surprised, Mors smiled softly. I know Alyssa, I can always count on you. Alyssa's face lit with a brilliant smile, but just as quickly she schooled her features back into her usual stoic calm. He boarded the radiant spear. Sir Davin Quar waited at the helm. Arthur Dane, Garth Hightower, Karen Toland, and Darrow stood with him. Eddard Stark had asked to join, and Mors had seen no reason to refuse. Mors looked back at Sunfort one last time. Davin. We sail when ready. Yes, my prince. Davin barked. As the warship cut free from the port, Eddard approached, awe plain in his eyes. Prince Mors, you've built something remarkable here. Your men are disciplined, loyal, they believe in you. Mors gave a modest smile. They were already fine men when they came to me. I only helped shape them into something greater together than apart. As for loyalty, treat men with respect, give them hope and a future, and the right ones will rise to it. The others, we send elsewhere. Karen joined with a grin. He sells himself short, Lord Stark. Every man here would throw himself into the sword for him. He trains with them, speaks with them, even listens to their petty woes. And he leads from the front, which makes our jobs miserable. That drew laughter from Garth, Arthur, and Darrow. Davin cut in. That he does. Fortunately, he has the strength for it. Then, to Mors, we should intercept the royal fleet within 4 to 5 hours. Any orders? Mors thought, then shook his head. Let the men rest while they can. We likely won't be able to avoid this fight like we did the previous one. Davin nodded in agreement, saluted and left. Eddard lingered, hesitant. Mors, do you think peace with Robert is possible? Mors frowned, then sighed. Ned, you know Robert better than anyone. I never sought him out, but he's made me the ghost he needs to chase for his parents' deaths. Always him, never me. Eddard's shoulders sagged. He's been stubborn since boyhood. Sometimes I think the stag is wrong, his sigil should have been the mule. Mors smirked faintly. From what I've seen, that suits him better. Eddard pressed on, voice heavy. Now that we fight for the same cause, I want to find a bridge. With Albert and John gone. His words faltered. Mors placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll have vengeance on Ares. On all of them. I'll see it through. Even if it means having to work with Robert. But understand this: his insults, his slanders. As Prince of the Stepstones, as a Prince of Dorne. Not declaring war or challenging him to duel of honor is already mercy. Eddard's head bowed, his shoulders seemed to sag in disappointment. Mors's tone sharpened. If I hadn't stopped Oberyn, he'd already have challenged Robert to a duel of death. The North keeps its word, but remember ours, unbowed, unbent, unbroken. We do not forget. He gave Eddard's shoulder a final squeeze before leaving to rest. Eddard stayed behind, hunched and thoughtful, staring out to sea. He wondered how he could mend the rift between the old friend he'd grown up with, and the new one fate had set in his path. Chapter 54, Chapter L, War Never Changes. After hearing that the king had declared Prince Mors Martell Targaryen of the Stepstones and by extension, all of Dorne traitors to be eliminated at once, Lord Mace Tyrell made his move. Storm's End had proven too difficult to break, the siege dragging on for months without progress. With no prospect of glory, and unwilling to waste his strength battering against its walls, Mace lifted the siege and turned south. Seeking honor in conquest, he chose instead to strike at the heart of Dorne, recalling the Reach's past victories there. Despite not being known for his military genius, he avoided the closer stoneway long known as a death trap and ordered his host to march the long road around, through the Prince's Pass. But surprisingly, the Dornish were waiting. Though outnumbered nearly 2 to 1, they had laid traps, and with superior knowledge of the land, harried and stalled the 21,000 men of the Reach with no more than 10,000. Even so, fortune favoured the Reachmen elsewhere. The small council had already dispatched the royal fleet to strike the stepstones. If the smaller fleet there could be destroyed, the royal navy would then have freedom to blockade both Dorne and the stepstones in a crushing pincer. Meanwhile, the rebels faced their own peril. The Westerlands, sensing weakness, poured in another 10,000 men. Lord Tywin himself moved to join forces with Lord Leo Leford, whose host had advanced from the Golden Tooth. Together they merged into a strength of 24,000, commanded now by Tywin with the aid of Lord Kevin Lannister, Lord Roland Crakehall, Lord Daemon Marbrand, and Lord Leo Leford. Yet the chaos of the Ironborn raids yielded an unforeseen boon. Their plundering along Iron Man's Bay drove wavering river lords into rebellion. Most surprising of all, Lord Valder Frey raised his banners, bringing an additional 5,000 men. With their arrival, the Riverland front swelled once more into a bloody stalemate, defined by constant skirmishes and near-daily clashes. Current forces engaged. Royal faction, 80k. Opposition faction, 72k. End of 279 AC. The narrow sea north of the Stepstones. The sun, high but not yet at its zenith, poured light across the narrow sea. From the bows of their ships, the Stepstones' fleet caught sight of the royal fleet bearing down upon them. Even at this distance, the numbers were plain. They were nearly outnumbered 2 to 1. Mors stood at the prow of the radiant spear, glass telescope raised, one of the Stepstones' many military innovations born from their mastery of Dornish glasswork, as it was now called. At his side stood Jeremy, Arthur, Karen, Garth, and Eddard, each taking in the sight. Karen gave a low whistle. "That's quite a fleet." Eddard's face tightened. "Aye, far too many ships." Arthur, unfazed, gave a confident smirk. "The good news is, with so many, it'll be hard to miss when the fighting starts." Behind them, Davin's voice barked orders across the deck. Horns sounded from ship to ship, a rolling wave of notes signaling each vessel's readiness. Mors lowered the glass. He spoke aloud so everyone could hear. "They're a league and a half off, 5 minutes, maybe less before we clash. This is a decisive fight. It will decide whether we can hold supremacy over the narrow sea. If we win here, no power on the eastern coast of Westeros will be able to threaten us. Only Essos or the Ironborn could contest us." He narrowed his violet eyes. "But we are outnumbered." He turned to Karen. "Hand me the spears from the chest." Karen blinked, then saluted and opened the iron-bound box. Inside rested 10 spears of unusual make, long, weighted, each tipped with a sealed flask of black liquid and a short fuse. He hefted one with effort and passed it to Mors. "Here, my prince." Mors tested the weight easily in one hand and gave a satisfied nod. "Perfect. This will be their first trial in battle. Light it." Karen struck flint, the fuse sparking to life. Eddard frowned and stepped closer, studying the thing. "What manner of weapon is this?" Arthur smirked, resting his sword on his shoulder. "You'll see soon enough, Ned." Mors flared his aura, focusing on increasing his already monstrous strength as he drew back, muscles coiling. He exhaled. "This isn't personal, Lord Lucarin. But the easiest way to kill a great serpent is to strike its head. May you choose better in your next life." Then he hurled the spear. It screamed across the sky, covering the distance in a heartbeat. On the deck of the Sea Dragon, Lord Lucarin Velaryon was giving out commands but turned at the startled shouts just in time for the spear to punch through his chest. It detonated in fire, engulfing him and his men. Flames leapt to the sails and mast, and as the ship stalled ablaze, 2 vessels astern collided into it and caught fire in turn. Mors launched another. And another. Each strike turned ships into infernos. Within moments, more than 30 vessels burned, the air filled with screams and the reek of smoke. Panic rippled through the royal fleet. "Fire!" Mors roared. Stepstones' bows thrummed, loosing volleys of arrows and fire shafts. The sky darkened, then blazed with falling flame. Enemy sails tore and kindled, the chaos spreading faster than command could rein in. But soon enough, the royal fleet rallied. Arrows and bolts hissed back, splashing into the sea or biting into wood and flesh. Even so, where once they'd faced over 200 ships, now only about 150 ships remained in fighting order. The odds were still against them but no longer impossible. Hard to port. Mors commanded. Ram them. As the radiant spear surged forward, an arrow cut the air. Mors caught it mid-flight inches from Eddard's face. He shoved it aside with a glare. Stay on your feet, Ned. Don't make me regret saving you. Eddard's face was pale, but he nodded. Aye. The ships crashed together. Brace! Mors shouted, gripping Solaris. The impact thundered, wood splintering. Grapples flew. Mors vaulted first, knives flashing, cutting down two before his boots touched deck. He rammed into a man, driving him backward into his comrades, then carved another apart with a brutal sweep. His companions Arthur, Jeremy, Karen, Garth, Eddard, Darrow, Cale, and Horan poured after him, blades cutting a path. Within minutes the deck was theirs. Clear! Darrow called, panting. On to the next, Mors ordered. They leapt back aboard the radiant spear, arrows hissing past as they turned toward another foe. They raged from ship to ship, carving a bloody path. At some point they were singled out as the greatest threat and set upon. Several enemy galleys rammed the radiant spear itself, trying to break the flagship and kill Prince Mors. Mors's brows furrowed. Damn it! We can't let them succeed. I'll go first. Hold here. Wait, Karen began, but Mors was already gone. Seven hells, Karen muttered. Princess Ashura will kill me. He turned to the others. After him. Garth said teasingly, as he ran, then you better not let her find out. Mors moved like a storm, vaulting rail to rail, Solaris blazing. He landed on the enemy deck with a sweeping strike, cleaving 7 men in one blow. The rest faltered, eyes wide. He struck again, using a falling body as a springboard to drive into another knot of foes. Panic broke them. I surrender, one cried. We yield, another screamed. Arthur and the others arrived, finishing the last of the resistance. Spare the ones who dropped their weapons, Mors commanded. Arthur nodded. Aye, my prince. Then came the horns. Dozens of them. Mors turned, heart thundering, until he saw banners rising on the horizon, the Sun and Spear of Dorne. Dorne is here! Mors roared. Now, finish them! A chorus rose from every deck. Dorne! For the stepstones! For Prince Mors! And the narrow sea burned with fire and battle cry. Later that afternoon. It was an overwhelming victory. The timely arrival of the Dornish fleet ended whatever fight the royal fleet could still offer, letting them pick the survivors off. About 50 ships got away. If not for the battle in the Prince's Pass, they'd have followed to finish them off. But they had achieved their goal and now had a more urgent battle front to reach. The fleet was heading back to Sunfort for a quick stop before moving to the Prince's Pass. Doran had led the fleet himself, Mors had joined him aboard the Dornish Sunday. The radiant spear trailed behind, badly damaged and being towed. Mors grinned. Your arrival couldn't have been more timely. Did you take your time so you could be the hero, brother? Doran smirked. Ah, I've been caught. No matter, so long as I can save my little brother and all can bask in the glory that is the Prince of Dorne, I'm satisfied. They both laughed. Even Ario Hota, Doran's personal guard, cracked a smile at the brothers' easy teasing. Then Mors grew solemn and sighed. I lost almost 500 men in that fight, men I'd recruited, trained, and fought beside. Doran nodded slowly. That is why war should be the last resort. No one truly wins in them. They fell quiet, watching the water. Mors broke the silence, not wanting to keep thinking about the losses. I lost 35 ships. You said you lost 5 ships. Dorne nodded. That's right. We didn't engage like you did, but we caught the last desperate struggle. Fortunately, you captured about 50 ships, isn't that right? Mors said. We captured about 50, but most need repair, they won't be of help for this war. They watched the stepstones draw nearer, a patrolling fleet moving along its edge. One of your patrols, Dorne said. The closest should be from Bloodstone, yes. Mors nodded. Correct. That'll be Sir Bedwick's patrol. We can't empty the stepstones not with Essos so close. He let the thought hang. Dorne looked toward Essos, face tight. Yes. Essos. After a quick stop for a cold meal, tending the wounded and leaving prisoners behind, they put to sea again. Mors was quiet, oddly melancholic. After sending Ashura on her way this time, he knew he would likely miss the birth of his first child, son or daughter, when he returned. He vowed the enemy would pay for it. The remaining 90 Stepstones ships, 75 Dornish warships, and 30 transports arrived at Euronwood a day later after a hard push. A Martell steward met them. The young lady of Euronwood, who was little Mairon's betrothed, was still being fostered at Sun's Pair. The Stepstones army disembarked, 5,000 men, 1,000 of them cavalry. Dorne had another 5,000 men waiting to join 2,000 cavalry among them. Mors swung into the saddle of Vezar. It should take about a day and a half on foot to reach the Prince's Pass, he said. We can't wait that long. It's growing dark, without the heat we can rush ahead with the cavalry and reach them by morning. We'll give them support sooner. Dorne hesitated, then looked to the sky. After a breath he nodded. Very well. We will follow your plan. They made quick preparations and rode out. Mors, Dorne, Karen, Eddard, Garth, Darrow, Kale, Horan, and Ario led the cavalry, 3,000 in total. They rode through the night, across the treacherous dunes and passes that make Dorne notorious, and reached the approaches to the Prince's Pass before dawn. Booms echoed from the mountains. Over the next rise they saw the battlements and camps on both sides, siege engines lobbing boulders, and men sheltered in trenches to escape the rain of stone. The Reach hurled boulders from trebuchets, the Dornish answered with scorpions and arrows. Despite the stalemate, the Dornish line was clearly losing ground. Mors watched everything carefully. For the first time he saw a proper pitched battle between armies, and he did not like it. It was a human grinder. 2 hosts pushed toward the center, and one was beginning to give way, about 8,000 Reachmen against 5,000 Dornish, and the Dornish were visibly more worn. We need to help them, quickly, he told Dorne. Go see the overall position. Find Uncle Lewin and Oberyn. Dorne stood up, Riot being put on the safer task. He understood Mors did not want him in the thick of it. All right. I'll check. 50 men, including Ario Hota, broke off with him. The remaining Dornish cavalry stayed with Mors. Dorne had named him their captain. Mors raised Solaris and pointed forward. The rest with me. Almost 3,000 cavalry thundered down the slope. Horns sounded, and hundreds of war cries rolled across the field, and for a breath the whole battle seemed to hold its breath. For the Stepstones, one voice cried. For Dorne, answered another. The Sun of Dorne, the line took up the cry. Arrows came faster as the defenders found new hope. The rooting men held a heartbeat longer. Then the cavalry struck Mors, Arthur, Eddard, Garth, Karen, and the rest at the spear's tip. They hit like a hammer upon an anvil. The charge cut into the Reachmen, 3,000 of them fell in that first blow, though the cavalry lost close to 500. The Reach, realizing the situation was dire, rallied an additional 10,000 fresh troops that had been waiting to switch in, and began to march forward to engage them, while 2,000 Dornish reinforcements that had been harassing the Reachmen with arrows moved in to support as well. When the Reach line finally broke, another 1,000 fell in the pursuit, but they halted the chase when the rest of the Reach army appeared on the ridge. Both sides pulled back. The Dornish, however, rode the high of the day. After the dead were gathered and the lines reorganized, the commanders met in Prince Lewin Martell's command tent that afternoon. Present were Prince Doran, Prince Lewin, Prince Oberyn, Prince Mors, Sir Jeremy, Sir Arthur, Lord Beric Dane, Lord Harmon Euler, and Lord Franklin Fowler. Oberyn sat beside Eddard, slung an arm across his shoulder, and said something that made the stoic young northern lord blush. Lewin spoke first. Doran, Mors, your arrival could not have come at a better time. The Reach would not let us breathe. With constant bombardment, shifting lines, night attacks, we were close to breaking. I did not know how long we could hold. Doran replied, solemn. We're here now. But we are only the vanguard. 7,000 more men are marching from Euronwood, they should be here in a day. Lord Franklin suggested, should we call on Prince Manfredi? He has 5,000 guarding the Stoneway. Even a few thousand could help. Doran and Lewin considered it, then met each other's eyes. Doran nodded for Lewin to take the lead as Grand Marshal. Lewin called toward the tent entrance, Tolan, get in here. Sir Tolan Vyr, one of the Spears of the Sun and Oberyn's lieutenant, hurried in. He nodded to the princes and to Mors. Send a note to Manfredi, Lewin said. Reinforce us with 2,000 men. Go, it's urgent. Tolan saluted and ran. They shared a short smile at the swift action, but Mors remained thoughtful. From what I saw today, the Reach still has over 14,000 men. We currently have fewer than 9,000. But once reinforcements arrive, we'll have more than 15,000, enough to meet them equally on the field. At that moment I don't think we should wait any longer for a final battle. Lewin frowned. Mors, I know you're used to pulling off dangerous, decisive strikes, but this isn't a matter of a few hundred men. We are talking about thousands of men here. If we engage them head-on, the losses will be terrible. Mors nodded in understanding, but smirked slightly. Of course, I understand that. But we won't fight them to the death. We need only hold them long enough for a small group to capture Lord Mace Tyrell. He grinned. Everyone's eyes went wide. Oberyn laughed. If anyone can pull that off, it's the Magician of King's Landing. Magician of King's Landing? Mors said, bemused. You haven't heard. Oberyn grinned. They're calling you that after sneaking into the Red Keep, rescuing Eddard Stark, and slipping out again without anyone catching wind of it until the end. It was like you were a magician. He laughed, delighted. Mors glanced at Doran, who gave a wry smile. I didn't think it was important enough to mention, Doran said, helplessly. Even Eddard cracked a smile at the memory. Grateful. Mors rubbed his brow. You were right, it's not an important matter mention. He straightened. As I was saying before. When the reinforcements arrive, that night, we face them in one final engagement to keep them busy. Then a small party led by me, will slip into their back lines and capture Lord Mace Tyrell. With him captive, they'll be forced to sue for terms. A murmur of assent ran through the tent. Doran said, if that's what you're thinking, I believe we can pull it off. He then turned to Lewin and, speaking more formally, asked, Grand Marshal Lewin, your orders. Prince Lewin reflected for a moment and then inclined his head. Then we shall proceed. Once. A boom outside cut him off. Faces tightened. Oh no, Lord Harmon Euler said, slapping his forehead. They've started the bombardments again. Lewin rose, voice hard. Then we will answer in kind. Pound them for a day. When our reinforcements arrive, we strike, and we end this tomorrow night. Dismissed. He rushed from the tent, barking orders. As everyone left the tent, Mors fell in beside Oberyn. Brother, out of curiosity, what did you say to Ned earlier? I don't think I've ever seen him flustered like that. Oberyn's smile turned hungry and he laughed. Oh, nothing much, Mors. Cyrena said she'd like to put a smile on that brooding northerner, and I offered to be an active helper. His grin widened. Mors sighed, then murmured. Of course it was something like that. Oberyn laughed and slung an arm around him. Come, brother. Let's find Dorne and catch up. This is war, any of us can die at any moment, so let's enjoy the time we have. He led Mors out, still chuckling. The next night, the sun bled into the horizon, staining the world red, a grim omen of what was to come. From the Stepstone's Dorne host, the deep thunder of war drums rolled across the field as they marched at last to meet their foe. The sudden offensive caught the Reachmen unprepared. For days the Dornish had sat entrenched, falling back step by step, bleeding ground yet refusing to break. The Tyrell host, dulled by the promise of inevitable victory, had grown lax in its vigilance. Lord Mace Tyrell himself, lulled into complacency, had been gorging at feast with his bannermen when the reversal came. Now, roused too late, he was forced to field his army against a greater force than he had ever believed Dorne could muster. Over 15,000 men advanced under the starless night, 10,000 in the main body, spear walls bristling in front, skirmishers and bowmen behind, and heavy infantry poised at the wings. Over 5,000 cavalry shadowed the flanks, including squadrons of mounted archers, their sand steeds restless for the charge. Mace blustered, but it was Lords Mathis Rowan and Quentin Roxton who seized the initiative, taking command of the flanks while leaving Mace the glory of the centre. 14,000 Reachmen marched to meet their foe, 9,000 in heavy mail, 5,000 knights and horsemen glittering like a tide of steel. The field shuddered as arrows flew. Both lines darkened the sky with shafts, men crumpling with cries as the ground became slick with blood. Dornish archers outnumbered their foes, but lighter armor meant their losses were keenly felt. Still, Prince Doran and Prince Lewin Martell pressed on without looking back. Each man had his duty, and for some of them, it was death. Then steel met steel. Spear walls slowed the Reach advance, long shafts cutting men down in rows. But once the heavy infantry pressed close, the balance shifted. Stepstone's troops surged into the fray, assaulting the flanks, while mounted archers rained arrows into weak points. When the cavalry joined, Dornish riders skirmished, darting in and out, while Stepstone's heavy horse slammed directly into enemy knights. The field became a storm of screams, steel, and shattered lances. But amid the chaos, another plan unfolded. Less than 10 riders had slipped away under the cover of the night, their movement hidden by the thunder of war drums. They now circled wide, cutting behind the Reach lines. There, Mors said, eyes narrowing. No more than 50 guards around Mace Tyrell. Oberyn grinned, playful even on the edge of slaughter. So, only slightly harder than usual. Mors smirked back. Around them, the chosen few readied themselves: Oberyn, Arthur Dane, Karen Toland, Garth Hightower, Tolan Vyr, Darrow, Horan, and Kale. Each man nodded in grim accord. Let's go, Mors ordered, aura spreading to horses and riders alike. They struck like a knife through silk. Throwing knives flickered in the dim light, felling 5 guards before the rest even turned. Then came the charge, steel biting deep as the Dornish carved through the circle. Mors saw Mace's retainers dragging him away and muttered coldly, "Oh no, you don't." He glanced at Oberyn. "Hold them. I'm going hunting." Oberyn laughed, driving into the melee with his spear. "Plenty here to keep me entertained." Arthur and Karen spurred after Mors. "Hold steady, Vezar," Mors whispered to his sand steed as he rose in the saddle. "Ram them once I'm gone." He leapt. Solaris flashed, carving down 3 men before his boots hit the ground. He vaulted clean over another, severing his head midair, then landed in a roll, spinning his spear to drive its butt squarely into Mace Tyrell's chest. The Reach Lord was hurled backward, crashing to the ground in a heap of silk and fat. Mors cut down the rest with brutal precision, then hauled the dazed mace up by his hair. Vezar! His horse trotted back at once. Mors swung into the saddle with mace draped before him, pressing a Valyrian dagger to his throat. His voice thundered over the din, "We have Mace Tyrell. Surrender, or he dies." The guards faltered, blades wavering. Oberyn and the others took up the cry. "Mace Tyrell is ours. Yield." The words rippled outward. First confusion, then disbelief, then the realization spreading like fire. Across the lines men began to shout it, "The Tyrell Lord is taken." The battle stalled. Mors rode into the center, dragging mace upright for all to see. The great lord of the Reach wept openly, snot and tears streaking his face. "Please," he babbled. "Spare me, I'll yield, I'll surrender, just don't hurt me." Crack! Mors's hand whipped across his face. "Silence! You speak when I command." Mace blubbered, "Yes, yes, I'll stay quiet." Crack! "Did I tell you to speak?" Mace sobbed, shaking his head violently. Arthur, riding beside Garth, caught the man's broad grin as Mace Tyrell sobbed like a scolded child. Leaning closer, eyes still sweeping for threats, Arthur asked quietly, "Isn't Mace Tyrell your brother-in-law?" Garth's smile only grew brighter, almost radiant. "Yes. Yes, he is." Arthur blinked, half ready to press the point but thought better of it. Mors raised his dagger high so all could see. His voice was cold as steel. "Surrender, or this war continues with your lord under Dornish hospitality. We shall see if noble Tyrell blood runs red like any other." Mace shrieked, panic breaking him. "No! No! Surrender! Mathis, Quentin, yield! Lay down your arms or you'll be traitors." Rowan and Roxton met each other's eyes. Resignation passed between them. At last, they cried out, "We yield! Men, down your weapons!" One by one, Reachmen dropped their swords, the clang of steel on earth spreading like a mournful dirge. A roar rose from the Dornish and Stepstone's ranks. "Glory to Dorne!" Oberyn shouted. "Prince Mors!" came the answering cry. "The Son of Dorne! Prince Mors!" The next morning, Mors and Luwin walked through the camp, surveying their wounded and their dead. Victory had come, but at a terrible price: 4,000 Dornish and Stepstones slain, 4,000 more Reachmen dead, and 10,000 captives. Luwin, his one eye hard, laid a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "Don't carry it all, Mors. This is war. You saved us all with that strike." Mors's face remained set. 8,000 dead, uncle. The cost is too high. This has to end quickly. Luwin sighed. You could leave the rest to fight between them. Neither side could ever truly take Dorne or the Stepstones. But Mors shook his head. "No. I'll ride north. We'll gather every rider we can muster and strike them back in the Riverlands. With Mace as our captive, the Reach will be crippled. This war ends before Elia's child is born." Luwin studied him, then nodded gravely. "Then go. I'll support you. Doran will too." That afternoon, 5,000 horsemen stood ready at the mouth of the Prince's Pass to ride out. Mors turned to his brother. "Doran, you should stay. Guard the rear with Uncle Luwin." Doran chuckled bitterly. "I may not wield a spear like you, but I won't sit idle while my younger brothers ride to war. I am a Martell. We do not bow, we do not bend, we do not break. I ride." He spurred his horse forward. Oberyn laughed and surged after him. "Then we ride together." Mors sighed, then grinned despite himself. "Like our races back in the Water Gardens." He lowered Solaris and gave the order. "Forward! Ride!" 5,000 voices cried out as the Princes of Dorne led the charge northward, three brothers, united, driving the war toward its end. Chapter 55, Chapter Lee, The Dawn of Dorne. It had been 20 days since the battle at the Prince's Pass, where the Dornish Stepstones host shattered the Reach army and captured Lord Mace Tyrell. The blow was crippling for the royal faction, nearly removing the Reach from the war entirely, though word of the defeat would take time to spread across Westeros. In the Riverlands, the rebels suffered disaster. Attempting a pincer strike against the royal host entrenched at Atrintat, the Riverlander and northern armies advanced, while the Vale marched wide to strike from Stonehenge in the east. But they failed to notice the new bigger Westerland host sweeping down from behind. Before the Vale could join the fight, the rebels were caught between hammer and anvil, Crownlanders and Reachmen to their front, Westerlanders and Ironborne to their rear. The result was ruin. Nearly 15,000 rebels fell, 5,000 of them river lords. Only the timely arrival of the Vale host prevented complete annihilation, buying enough time for a retreat to Riverrun Castle. The fortress was hastily fortified further as the battered rebels licked their wounds. Royal losses numbered fewer than 5,000. Jaime Lannister, who had slipped unnoticed into the host under Lord Leo Leford's command, distinguished himself in the fighting. Though but 14, he wielded sword and shield with a prowess that astonished even seasoned knights, felling foes with a speed and precision rare in one so young. Word of his valor spread quickly, and when Prince Rhaegar himself took note, he praised Jaime openly and, on the field, knighted him. Were it not for Prince Mors Martell having earned his spurs sooner still, Jaime's feat would have stood unmatched in recent living memory. Lord Tywin's wrath at his heir's recklessness was sharp, yet even he could not suppress his pride at the honour. From that day forward, though Jaime was permitted to remain with the host, Tywin kept him ever close at his side, unwilling to risk his son stealing back into battle unseen. Yet worse followed for the rebels. As they dug in at Riverrun, a string of mysterious murders unsettled the camp, ending in a bloody melee that left Lord Rickard Stark maimed, his sword hand gone below the elbow, and Brandon Stark gravely wounded. The culprit, known only as the Smiling Knight, was slain in the brawl, but not before cutting down Ethan Glover, Martin Castle, and Mark Ryswell from the northern host. In the chaos, the remaining Kingswood Brotherhood, who first swore to Robert Baratheon's cause, seeing the death of one of their lead members, and not understanding the full series of events, turned their blades against northern men. Dozens died before Robert Baratheon, Hoster Tully, and Denisoran imposed order, but the damage lingered. Distrust festered, and the bond between the North and Stormlands turned bitter cold. With Rickard bedridden by fever, Brandon, though still recovering from his wounds, assumed temporary command. Now, with the rebels weakened and divided, the royal host encircled Riverrun, determined to end the war at its heart, breaking the rebellion and punishing Robert Baratheon, whom the king named the chief instigator of treason. Prince Rhaegar and the Hand of the King, Lord Tywin Lannister, offered terms to Lords Denisoran, Rickard Stark, and Hoster Tully: surrender, bend the knee, deliver Robert Baratheon, and offer hostages in pledge of loyalty, and they would be permitted to return home in peace. But could they trust the word of a mad king who had already burned alive an heir of a realm, while the lord died mysteriously in his hands? The realm held its breath, waiting to see how the war and the fate of Westeros would be decided. Current forces engaged. Royal faction, 55k. Opposition faction, 52k. Beginning of 280 AC Red Grassfield, the Crownlands. Dawn broke slow and pale over the Crownlands, the rising sun still little more than a crimson edge on the horizon. Dew clung to the tents and glimmered on the armor laid out to dry. The Dornish Stepstones host rested after 20 relentless days of marching, 2 days riding, half a day resting, the rhythm of soldiers bound for war. Having crossed the Reach at last, they now camped at the fringes of the Crownlands. If all went well, in 5 more days they would reach the Riverlands. Yet the news that reached them along the way gave little comfort. Mors was already awake, his tent open to the chill morning air. He moved alone in the clearing, blades flashing in measured arcs. Unlike his usual training, today he fought with sword and dagger together, both Valyrian steel, both breathtaking in craftsmanship. He flowed through each motion: thrusts, sweeps, vaults, a blur of fluid precision. A familiar whistle broke the silence. 7 hells, that's impressive, brother, Oberyn called, grinning as he approached. Mors slowed, then sheathed the dagger and turned, still smiling faintly. Just getting used to the weight. He lifted the black longsword, its rippled steel catching the dawn. It's a fine blade. Oberyn chuckled. I'd hope so. It's Valyrian steel. Orphan maker, isn't it? Mors nodded. Oberyn folded his arms. Will you return it to Lord Roxton after the war? You don't have to. Mors hummed in thought. We'll see. For now, it serves me well. He spun the sword once, cutting air before sliding it home into its sheath. Oberyn's eyes flicked between the weapon's orphan maker, the Valyrian dagger crochet, and the spear Solaris slung across Mors's back. He let out a low whistle. You know, I always thought Valyrian steel was rare enough that most men die without ever seeing one. Even Tywin Lannister would trade a fortune for a blade like that. I've searched for years and found nothing, and you. He trailed off, shaking his head. Mors smirked. Sounds like a performance issue on your part, brother. Truly tragic. Oberyn gaped in mock outrage. Performance issue. He lunged at him, and the two brothers grappled briefly, laughing as they rolled in the grass. Children, came Duran's weary voice. He had approached unseen and now stood rubbing the bridge of his nose. Must I send you both to your tents for punishment? Mors, you're a prince, act like one. Oberyn. He sighed. Well, I suppose there's only so much to hope for. Mors and Oberyn broke apart, still grinning as they dusted themselves off and started back toward the camp. But halfway there, Mors suddenly froze. His head turned southeast, eyes narrowing. Doran and Oberyn stopped as well, their laughter fading. Someone's coming? Doran asked. Mors's jaw tightened. Yes. Many. Wake everyone. They'll be here in less than half an hour. Doran and Oberyn exchanged a quick glance, then ran to rouse the camp. By the time the first distant thunder of hooves reached them, the soldiers of Dorne and the stepstones were already mounted, tents packed, banners drawn down. A wall of dust rose on the horizon, and the morning stillness gave way to the pulse of war once more. They made out the banners at last. Black Stag of the Stormlands among others, and a ripple of tension eased through Mors's men. Mors allowed himself a small exhale. It's the Stormlands, he called back, and the line relaxed a fraction, though vigilance remained. Old grudges die hard. Two hosts faced one another across the field. A detachment of 7 rode up with Mors Doran and Oberyn at his side, Ario Hota, Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Karen Toland, and Sir Garth Hightower among them. Across from them stood a stern youth of about 16, broad-shouldered, tightly set, handsome if not for the constant furrow of his brow. Beside him sat an older man whose grave features were softened by eyes that had seen much, another, younger but equally imposing that looked very much like the older man, rode nearby. A pair of riders trailed behind, banners snapping in the wind. Mors took the front, Doran to his left. He folded his arms, letting his voice carry. I am Prince Mors Martell of the Stepstones, and this is Prince Doran Martell of Dorne. Prince Oberyn and our guard ride with us. You bear the Stormlands colors. Are you bound for the Riverlands to join the rebels? The youth rode forward and answered with measured brevity. I am Lord Stannis Baratheon. At my flank are my grandfather, Lord Edwin Estermont of the Isles, and my uncle, Sir Eldon Estermont. Behind us are my cousins Sir Aemon and Sir Lomas Estermont. We ride to join my brother in the Riverlands. And you march for the same cause. Mors scanned the Estermont contingent with a quick appraisal. Solid men, committed, and nodded. We were at the Prince's Pass. We routed the Reach there and hold Lord Mace Tyrell captive. Our plan is to force the Reach's hand in the Riverlands, weakening the royal loyalist, while we focused on routing the rest. At that Stannis's face changed, a spark of grim satisfaction brightening his features. Good. We bring 5,000 riders. We can join you and strike together. Mors and Doran exchanged a look and inclined their heads in agreement. Doran's voice was measured but firm, then welcome, Lord Stannis. Together we will end this war. 10 days later outside of Riverrun. It was evening when they arrived. The air was thick with the scent of ash and iron, the taste of blood and defeat. From beyond the hills came the low, rhythmic thunder of siege engines, and the flicker of firelight on distant tents painted the fields in a sickly orange hue. The oppression of war hung heavy. For 5 days they had slowed their pace, forced to deal with patrols and scattered garrisons along the way to keep their rear secure. Now, as they looked down upon the encamped host encircling Riverrun, they finally saw the full scale of the war's heart. Mors, Oberyn, Eddard, Arthur, Karen, and Elton crouched among the rocks, watching the enemy camp stretch to the horizon. Every so often, a massive boulder or heavy quarrel arced through the air toward Riverrun's walls to little effect. The fortress stood defiant, its stone walls scarred but unbroken. How long those within could hold, however, was another question entirely. Oberyn's usual levity was gone. "This is worse than I expected." Mors studied the lines for a long while before speaking. "At least 50,000 men, probably more. The Reach alone makes up 15. I can't speak for what's left inside the walls." A grim silence followed. Then Mors murmured faintly. "We've seen enough. Let's head back." They retreated back to the forest north of Acorn Ridge, where they regrouped with their army and gathered the commanders in a makeshift council tent. As reports were shared, Doran watched his younger brother closely. The furrow in Mors's brow told him he was already forming a plan. "Mors," Doran said finally, "you have that look again. What are you thinking?" Mors looked around the table. "Having Mace Tyrell as our captive helps, but it won't be enough. The enemy's numbers are too great. We need coordination from within Riverrun itself." The implication landed. Silence. Then unease. Doran's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you plan to go inside yourself." Mors's only answer was a quiet smile. "Seven hells, Mors!" Doran snapped. "You can't keep throwing yourself into danger like this." Even Oberyn, reckless as ever, gave a reluctant nod of agreement. Lord Edwin Estermont spoke up. "How many men are you thinking to send?" Mors's smirk widened. "Just one." It took a moment for them to realize he meant himself. Stannis's brows furrowed. "As skilled as you may be, Prince Mors, you can't hinge a war on one man. That's madness." Mors looked past him to Doran and Oberyn. "You both know why. The more men I take, the more I have to divide my focus. Alone, I can move faster and unseen." Doran and Oberyn exchanged a heavy look. They understood. The more Mors spread his aura, the weaker it became, but if he acted alone, his full power could manifest. Doran exhaled slowly. "You realize what that means? Once you do this, there's no hiding what you are. What you can do." Mors placed a steady hand on his brother's shoulder. "I know. It's time they see what they truly face." Doran's shoulders sank in resignation. Oberyn, by contrast, grinned broadly. "Then let them see," he said with a laugh. Eddard, already having witnessed everything himself, nodded solemnly. Stannis and the Estermont men stared, bewildered. Eldon muttered to his father, "What in the seven hells are these Martells talking about?" Lord Edwin merely sighed, though concern now darkened his expression. Mors straightened. "Then it's settled. I'll go alone." Stannis ground his teeth. "What do you mean it's settled? Nothing about this is settled. This isn't some Dornish game." Mors turned to him and unleashed his aura. The air thickened. A weight pressed down upon the tent. Stannis, Edwin, and Eldon staggered back instinctively, hands flying to their weapons. Eldon gasped, "What sorcery is this?" But before they could act, Mors extended his will and the crushing pressure shifted. Strength flooded through them. Stannis blinked, looking at his hands as if seeing them anew. I feel stronger. Quicker. My thoughts, they are clearer. He looked up at Mors, eyes wide with awe and confusion. Mors nodded once, then let the power fade. That, he said calmly, is why you need not worry. I am the chosen of the seven, their champion. He thought privately, seven help me, I still cringe every time I say that, but it's the easiest explanation for them. Doran and Oberyn smirked knowingly, saying nothing. Stannis, still shaken, straightened and gave a solemn nod. Then I understand. You have my respect, and my caution. May the seven guard you. Lord Edwin looked as if he wanted to object but held his tongue. Mors exhaled and turned back to the group. Good. Now, one last thing, we'll need to reach out to the Reachmen. If we can get them to act in concert, we can turn this siege into chaos. Bring Mace Tyrell, we'll see what information he can provide. The Red Fork that night. In the black of night, four shadowed figures cut silently through the cold waters of the Red Fork, heading straight for Riverrun. Despite Mors's insistence on going alone, Sir Karen Toland and Sir Garth Hightower, his sworn sword shields, had refused to let him. And Sir Arthur Dane, though he knew Mors now surpassed him in skill, would not see his brother-in-law go unguarded. Mors' aura covered them all, ensuring the cold wouldn't be too hard on them. They halted mid-current. Mors spoke low enough that only they could hear. From here we'll go under. Use the reeds to breathe. If anything goes wrong, signal me immediately. Though uneasy, the three knights nodded. A few moments later, four thin reeds drifted just beneath the water's surface, moving slowly toward the looming shadow of Riverrun. In the dark, they blended easily among weeds and ripples, only a keen eye at close range might have noticed. But with most of the garrison asleep, no one did. They reached the iron grates that let the river flow beneath the castle. Mors surfaced first, only his eyes above the water. Seeing no movement, he signaled the others. Garth emerged next, stifling a cough with his hand. Arthur steadied him. Get it out, Arthur whispered. You did well to hold this long. Garth drew a sharp breath between ragged chuckles. I thought I was drowning. Mors's eyes swept the shadows for movement. Satisfied, he turned to the bars. We'll need to widen the gap. Let me handle it. He gripped two bars, braced a foot against the stone, and pulled with his aura strength. Instead of bending, one of the bars snapped free with a sharp crack. Oops. He frowned, then shrugged. Seems they've rusted through. I did them a favor discovering it. Ahem, let's move. Arthur's lips twitched despite himself. He forced down a laugh. Of course, Prince Mors. Ever the altruist. They slipped through the opening and waded quietly to the riverbank inside the walls. So what's the plan now, my prince? Karen asked softly. Keep to the shadows. Mors glanced around, gauging the courtyard's emptiness. No. We're not sneaking. We're announcing ourselves. If we startle anyone, it'll just make things worse. Garth, Karen, and Arthur exchanged a look of mild disbelief but followed. They approached a lone sentry slumped by a post, half asleep on his spear. Mors drew back his hood and called out in a calm tone, Ho there! We come to aid you. Send word to Lord Hoster Tully at once. The guard jolted upright, eyes going wide at the sight of Mors's pale hair and Valyrian features. By the seven, the Targaryens are inside. Sound the alarm. Mors froze mid-step, face falling. Ah. Right. That's still a thing. Within seconds, half a dozen men came running. Steel flashed in torchlight as they surrounded the four intruders. Arthur, Karen, and Garth stepped forward defensively, while Mors sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. The captain barked, Drop your weapons. Your infiltrations failed. Mors raised both hands slowly. "Stand down, men," he said to his knights. Then to the guards, "You're mistaken. I'm Prince Mors Martell, ruler of the Stepstones. We've come with reinforcements and entered to coordinate a counterattack. I revealed myself so you'd know we mean no harm. Please take us to Lord Hoster." The soldiers glanced at one another, startled by the claim, but their captain's caution held firm. "Is that so? Then tell me, how did you get past almost 60,000 men outside our walls?" "Simple," Mors said evenly. "We swam the Red Fork. Came in through a small opening back there." He pointed toward the river grate. The captain blinked. "Through the bars? Impossible. You check it." A younger guard balked. "What? In the river? It's freezing." "Now," the captain snapped. Grumbling, the man stripped off his cuirass and waded in. A few minutes later, he resurfaced, sputtering. "It's true, sire. One of the bars is gone." The captain's expression changed from suspicion to alarm. "Seven hells, that could have been a disaster." He turned sharply to Mors. "My apologies, Prince Mors. It seems your story checks out. You may have just saved us from a night assault." Mors, without missing a beat, inclined his head solemnly. "Of course. Always glad to help the cause. Now time is short. Lead us to Lord Hoster." "Yes, Prince Mors." The captain barked new orders. "Seal that grate. Post 2 men there until dawn." As they followed the captain toward the inner courtyard, Arthur cast Mors a sidelong look, smirk tugging at his mouth. Mors met it briefly, then looked straight ahead, pretending not to notice. Riverrun the Lord Solar. The 4 soaked intruders were given blankets and a small hearth fire to dry themselves while they waited. The chamber smelled faintly of damp wool and smoke. Garth spoke first, still rubbing warmth back into his hands. "You think this council will go smoothly?" Arthur considered it, eyes on the flames. "It should. Lord Baratheon might roar a bit, but he's not unreasonable. With us here, cooler heads should prevail." The door swung open. Lord Hoster Tully entered at a brisk pace, Sir Brynden Tully close behind. Relief and excitement lit Hoster's face the moment he saw them. "By the 7, it's true. Prince Mors Martell, here in Riverrun." Mors rose and inclined his head respectfully. "Well met, Lord Hoster. I believe this is the first time we really meet. We came as swiftly as we could. I assume we wait for the others before we begin." Hoster exhaled, the weight of weeks of siege showing in his tired eyes, but he nodded. "Aye. Best if all are present." Brynden stepped forward with a faint grin. "Prince Mors, I remember watching you at the tourney of Lanny Sport. Even then, I thought, that one will make his mark. Seems I was right." Mors returned the smile. "You honor me, Sir Brynden. Coming from a knight of your repute, that means much. Sir Barristan often speaks highly of you." Brendan's brows rose. "Barristan? He's with you?" His surprise broke through his usual calm. But at that moment the door opened again, another familiar voice came from the doorway. "Prince Mors. 7 hells, it's good to see you." Lord Denisoran strode in with a soldier's gait, grinning as he clasped Mors's forearm. Mors smiled faintly. "Since the Lanny Sport tourney, wasn't it?" Dennis nodded, the grin fading. "I would that it were under better skies." Mors hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I'm sorry for John and Elbert. I know they were close to you. John especially, he all but raised you." Dennis's expression darkened, his jaw tight. "Aye, and they'll pay for it. We can mourn the dead when the war's done." The door slammed open again. "You bastard!" All heads turned as Robert Baratheon stormed in, fury written across every line of him. "This is your fault. All of it." Hoster and Dennis groaned in unison and dragged their palms down their faces. Robert charged, bellowing, "Ours is the fury!" Mors sighed, already stepping forward. His guards tensed to intercept, but he raised a hand. As Robert's massive right hook came swinging, Mors slipped aside, caught the man's wrist with his own, and drove his knee into the Storm Lord's gut. Robert folded with a strangled groan, half drooling as he dropped to his knees. "Oo gods!" Brandon Stark hurried in behind, one hand pressed to his stomach where a wound still troubled him, shaking his head in weary dismay. "Unfortunately, I couldn't stop him." He stepped past the fallen Robert to clasp Mors's forearm. "Prince Mors. I've wanted to speak with you since Lanny Sport, but I suppose this isn't the time. Is Eddard with you?" Mors smirked faintly. "He is. He's with our camp outside. I'll bring him when things settle." He glanced down at Robert. "Though perhaps someone should fetch water first." Hoster called for a servant. Robert was soon dragged to a chair, coughing and glaring daggers all the while. When order returned, they gathered around the council table. The fire crackled as Mors began. The Reach host under Mace Tyrell was defeated. "We hold Mace captive. He's with us. Our intent is to force the Reach to withdraw from the Riverlands while we move to crush the remaining royal forces. We brought 5,000 cavalry for speed, and along the way, we met Lord Stannis Baratheon and the Lords of Estermont, followed by other loyal Stormlander lords. They brought another 5,000, fresh from purging their turncoats. But we need to know what we can count on from your side." Robert, still catching his breath, glanced up sharply at Stannis's name. His glare softened for an instant, then returned in full. Brandon folded his arms, his tone level. "Inside these walls, we have 35,000 left fit to fight. But rations are thin, morale thinner. The siege has cost us dearly." Hoster nodded grimly. "We've lost too many already. The men are starving, but they'll stand if they have hope." Mors's violet eyes swept the lords around the table. "Then we give them hope. We end this by tomorrow." Dennis leaned forward. "Truly?" Mors nodded. "Wake every able man. Feed them well, today is their last day of hunger. When they're ready, I send the signal. Stannis's archers and mine will rain arrows on the royal camp, while they reel in confusion, we strike." Dennis frowned. "That's a rather simple plan." Surprisingly, it was Robert, still rubbing his stomach, who grunted out in agreement, "Simple or not, it'll work if it hits hard enough." Hoster shared a look with his brother Brynden, who nodded slightly. "Sometimes simplicity wins the day," Hoster said. Brynden continued, "Precision and timing will decide it. We'll prepare the men." The others murmured in agreement. Robert stood abruptly, a grin breaking through his bruised pride. "Then let's end this bloody war, and after, you and I have that duel, Martell." Mors only raised a brow. "I look forward to it." Robert's laughter boomed as he left the room, followed by Brandon and Dennis. Hoster signalled to Brynden, who slipped out as well. Then he turned back to Mors, Arthur, Garth, and Karen. "The men will be seen to. In the meantime, join me for supper. Might be our last meal in peace for some time." Mors nodded, a tired but genuine smile touching his face. "Very well, Lord Tully. Lead the way." The Battle of Riverrun. It was the hour before dawn. It felt cold, heavy, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Mors stood beside the lords of the allied host, each man silent, the weight of what was to come pressing on them all. He knocked a flaming arrow, drew the bowstring to his ear, and loosed. The arrow arced high, far above the royal camp. A few half-awake sentries spotted it and laughed, thinking it a stray or misfire. A heartbeat later, a sound tore through the air, 1,000 more arrows following from the other side. "Enemy attack!" someone shouted, but too late. Fire rained down. Tents went up in flame. Men screamed as confusion turned to chaos. Mors turned to the gathered lords. "Now! Hoster Tully slammed his sword to his shield. Go! Denisorin roared, for the Vale. Brandon Stark lifted his sword. This will be the hour of the wolf. Robert Baratheon bellowed, with me. The gates of Riverrun burst open. The allied host surged out like a breaking tide. Steel clashed and the world became blood and smoke. The Crownlands, Westerlands, and Ironborn rallied in fury, while the Reachmen scrambled back to meet the men who had been firing from the back. The fields outside the castle burned bright as day. Mors led the charge with Arthur Dane, Garth Hightower, and Karen Toland beside him. Around them, men died by the dozen. Robert Baratheon's hammer rose and fell, crushing men as he laughed through the slaughter. Denisorin's knights gleamed like silver lightning as they tore into the flank. But the Ironborn hit the Riverlanders hard, their brutal fighting unlike anything the mainland men had faced. The field was chaos, 100 battles in one. Then Mors saw him. A tall, dark figure in black plate amidst the Crownlander banners. Rhaegar, he murmured, a cruel smile touching his lips. Found you. Rhaegar was cutting down Valamon with precision and grace. Even Mors could admit the prince's swordplay was sublime. But not enough. Not this day. He strode toward him through the melee, calling out, "Cousin! Fancy meeting you here, it feels like destiny." Rhaegar turned sharply, disbelief twisting into alarm as he saw the Dornish and Stepstone's banners join the fray behind Mors. You! How this can't be! He glanced toward the Reachmen's camp gone, cavalry sweeping through where they should have been. His eyes widened in horror. That's impossible. Mors smiled coldly. Nothing is impossible. He slid Solaris across his back and drew his Valyrian sword. Today, cousin, I bring you a gift. The gift of death. Rhaegar's Kingsguard closed in, Sir Oswell went, Sir Jonothor Derry, Sir Miles Mouton, Sir Richard Lynmouth, all between them and their prince. Arthur, Garth, and Karen met them head-on, steel shrieking. Mors lunged for Rhaegar. The prince parried once, then barely avoided the second strike. The blade tore through his armor and bit deep. Valyrian steel! He gasped, stunned by the wound. Fury overtook him. You bastard! You always steal what should be mine! He struck with flawless precision, thrust, cut, feint, but Mors flowed around each blow like water. Then Mors stepped in close and drove a punch into Rhaegar's jaw. Bone cracked. Blood and teeth flew. Rhaegar crumpled to his knees, gagging. Mors tilted his head. Missing something? No worries, let's even the rest. He slashed once clean, but very brutal. Rhaegar screamed, clutching what was left of his face. My nose. My lip. His voice slurred through blood and ruin. Mors looked down with quiet satisfaction. Better. Now your outside matches your inside. He raised his sword for the killing blow. But Miles Mouton threw himself in front of the strike. The blade pierced through him. Go, my prince! Miles gasped, then went still. Mors kicked the corpse aside. Arthur and Garth closed ranks beside him, Karen limping forward, bleeding. Oswell went dragged Rhaegar away with a wounded Richard Lynmouth, while Jonothor Derry held the line desperately. Mors lifted his blade. No matter who stands before me, Rhaegar dies today. Then a shout tore across the field. Doran! Mors froze. He turned just in time to see his brother fall from his horse, an arrow through the neck. No! He sprinted. Oberyn was already kneeling beside Doran, pressing the wound. Hold on, brother. Mors is here, he can heal you. Mors fell to his knees, placing his hand over the wound, pouring his aura into it. But his hand began to tremble. No, he whispered. His spine's shattered. Even if I heal him, he won't breathe again. Oberyn's tears streamed down his face. No, no, brother. Doran's eyes fluttered. Don't worry. I die, as the Prince of Dorne. Then his breath left him. Oberyn's cry echoed through the din. Doran! Mors didn't move. His brother's blood stained his hands. For the second time in his life, he had failed to save the one he loved most. Then something broke inside him. He rose slowly, aura burning through him like wildfire. The ground trembled beneath his feet. This ends, now. He saw the king's guard trying to escape with the injured rigger. He seized a fallen spear, eyes blazing violet. He hurled it with all his might. The weapon screamed through the air, cutting through sound itself. It struck Rigger square in the back, piercing through his chest, horse, and the earth beyond. Both fell in silence. Mors drew Solaris, his aura flaring so bright it seemed to warp the air around him. Then he moved. No one could follow. Men simply fell cut down before they saw him coming. Dozens, then hundreds. Each step left corpses in his wake. Stannis, fighting nearby, froze at the sight. He truly is the champion of the seven, he whispered in awe. The warrior and the stranger combined. The battlefield grew still. Even the Ironborn began to retreat. Quellan Greyjoy fell, coughing blood. Euron Greyjoy raised his bow in desperation, fired only for Mors to catch the arrow barehanded, turn it, and fling it back. It buried itself in Euron's chest. The man fell before he could even blink. At last, Mors stood alone in the center of the field. No one dared move. He raised his voice, deep and cold. If you do not wish for me to slaughter every last one of you, lay down your arms. This war ends now. His words rolled like thunder, echoing across the blood-soaked plain. One by one, soldiers royalist and rebel alike dropped their weapons. Denys Arryn, Brynden Tully, Brandon, and Eddard Stark approached cautiously. Stannis followed, eyes burning with conviction. He stopped beside Mors, then turned to the stunned men around them. Rejoice, he called out. The champion of the seven has come to end this war. As you see, all he desires, he raised his sword, is peace. Mors blinked, speechless. Did I just gain a follower? But the battle was over. Silence swept the field, broken only by the moans of the dying and the crackle of distant fire. The war had ended. Midday a few hours later. After the royal loyalists' surrender, it took hours to carry the dead, tend the wounded, and restore some order to the battlefield. The Ironborn had fled amid the chaos, but 15,000 Westerland's troops and nearly 4,000 Crownlanders remained captured. The Reachmen, 15,000 strong, were tasked with guarding them, with Lord Mace Tyrell swearing his fealty to the rebel cause. Another 10,000 of the Allied forces stood behind as a deterrent in case the Ironborn returned. Mors retired to his tent soon after the battle ended, utterly spent. His body ached from the toll of his aura, every muscle trembling, his mind clouded with exhaustion. He barely managed to remove his armor before collapsing onto the cot. Outside, his loyal guards kept silent watch through the long morning, blades ready, ensuring none disturbed their prince's rest. At midday, what remained of the Allied host, 25,000 men, marched toward King's Landing to end the war once and for all. Yet as the lords rode at the head of the column, the air hung heavy with tension. Victory was near, but peace still seemed far. Robert broke the uneasy silence. Then it's settled. I'll be king when this is done. No one's better suited. Isn't that right, Ned? You'll be my hand, handle all that ruling nonsense while I drink and celebrate. He laughed, broad and booming. Denys Arryn frowned. This still needs discussion. There are others with as much claim as you, Lord Robert. Robert's smile vanished. Who? You don't mean that Martell bastard, do you? He's as much Targaryen as the mad one we about to overthrow. I won't have it. At that, Stannis turned sharply in his saddle, voice like iron with defiance. Watch your tongue, brother. Prince Mors deserves your respect. Besides, he's got as much Targaryen blood as our father had, and insulting him is cursing your own blood. Eddard, Brandon, Brynden, and Denys all shot Robert sharp looks of disapproval. Oberyn muttered something dark under his breath, hand twitching toward his sword, but Mors stayed silent, his violet eyes fixed on the horizon. Then, suddenly, his expression changed. His eyes narrowed, as if he could feel something in the distant. Wait! Stop! His tone turned grim. Something's wrong. Robert scowled. What now? You want to fight me for the crown? Go ahead, I'll... Silence! Mors's voice cracked like thunder. The command froze everyone in place. The column halted. He stared toward the distant city, his aura flaring faintly. Brace yourselves! Boom! The world erupted. A blinding flash consumed the horizon. From where King's Landing stood rose a colossal column of emerald fire, wildfire mushrooming into the sky. The Red Keep crumbled in an instant. The shockwave rolled across the plains, throwing men and horses to the ground. The sound tore through the air like the scream of gods. When the roaring finally faded, nothing remained but fire and ruin. Where once stood the greatest city in Westeros, there was only ash. Mors stood unmoving, staring into the green inferno. In the crackle of burning wildfire, he swore he could still hear Aerys's mad laughter echoing in his mind. Without a word, he remounted his horse and rode forward. This can't be happening. Half an hour later, they reached the edge of the devastation. No walls. No towers. No people. Not even corpses. Just blackened stone and wildfire burning with a life of its own. It's gone, Mors whispered. The lords gathered behind him in silence. Robert, Hoster, Dennis, Brandon, Eddard, Oberyn, Arthur, Garth, all of them all struck dumb by the sight. Mors turned to them at last. His voice was quiet, but every word carried the weight of finality. Dorne and the Stepstones are leaving. Whoever wishes to rule this ruin can have it. From this day forth, we are free. He looked to the other Dornishmen. We are independent. He turned his horse, and his men followed without hesitation. Robert's voice bellowed after him, half fury, half disbelief. What do you mean free? You can't just walk away. I'll be king me. You hear me, Martell? Get back here, you damned bastard! But his shouts faded into the smoke and ash. And Mors never looked back. Early 280 AC Sun's Pair, Dorne. A month later, the host finally reached Sun's Pair. Along the way, they had stopped at the Prince's Pass to free the captive Reachman. Sir Luwin, Sir Jeremy, and Prince Manfrey, upon hearing of Duran's death, had joined the solemn procession home. By then, news of their victory and the destruction of King's Landing had spread across the realm. The people of Dorne celebrated wildly as the army marched through the city gates, cheering for their returning heroes. But for the men at the front, the triumph rang hollow. While the army veered toward the barracks, Mors, Oberyn, Luwin, Jeremy, Manfrey, Arthur, Garth, Karen, and Ario made their way into the court. A smiling Melario came forward to greet them. She embraced Mors, Oberyn, and Manfrey in turn, offering a warm smile to the rest, but her expression faltered when she noticed their silence. Her gaze darted from face to face, reading what none dared to say. Her voice trembled. Where is Doran? Oberyn's composure broke. His jaw clenched, his eyes filling with tears. Melario followed his gaze and saw it, the long black coffin draped in the banner of House Martell. She stumbled back. No! Her cry tore through the hall. No! No, no, no! She collapsed, unconscious. Arianne, carried by a nursemaid, began to wail. Get her to her chambers, Mors ordered softly, kneeling beside Melario to check her pulse. Give her something to rest through the night. Arianne as well. He stood, exhaling slowly. Guard the coffin day and night. We'll begin preparations for the funeral. Later, in the solar, the men sat together. Mors, Oberyn, Luwin, Manfrey, Arthur, and Jeremy. No one took the prince's seat. A single bottle of Dornish red passed between them before Mors finally spoke. Lady Arianne will need a regent, he said quietly. Uncle Lewin. I think it should be you. Oberyn nodded in agreement. Lewin let out a long sigh, staring at the table. After a moment, he nodded. I. Silence settled again, deep and heavy. The next morning, as preparations for the funeral continued, Sir Ormond Euler, the Castellan of Sunspear and Duran's former hand, burst into the throne room, a letter clutched in his hand. Prince Mors. Mors turned, alarmed by his tone. Uncle Ormond, what's happened? Panting, Ormond handed him the letter. Princess Melario, she's gone. Mors's eyes widened. He opened the letter and read quickly, then sank onto a chair, rubbing a hand over his face. Moments later, Oberyn and Manfredi rushed in. What happened? Oberyn demanded. We heard shouting outside. Mors didn't answer. He simply passed them the letter. They read it and both seemed to deflate. Oberyn slammed the parchment onto the table. Why? Why would she leave and take Arianne? We would have cared for them. We're family. Mors shook his head, his voice weary. She was raised in Norvos. To her, this life is poison. She wrote that others would demand Arianne be replaced or worse. She'd rather raise her daughter far from it all, even if it means rescinding her claim. Lewin entered in time to hear the last words. He kicked over a chair, his face twisted with grief. Ormond turned to Oberyn. Prince Oberyn, by right of succession. No, Oberyn cut in sharply. Elia comes next. We should be preparing to support her ascension. Lewin exhaled slowly, then straightened, standing tall. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost weary. Oberyn, she married the crown prince. Under Martell law, that disinherits her. You know this. Oberyn shook his head, fierce and unyielding. Then forget it. I want nothing to do with the throne. His voice faltered despite himself. I can't. I need to leave. For a while. Mors. Mors looked up, meeting Oberyn's gaze and seeing the strain there, raw, desperate. That's right, Mors said hesitantly. We can change the law for Elia. Who's going to stop us? And besides... He gave a hollow half-smile. I already have a kingdom. Lewin, who seemed to have aged years in the span of a breath, shook his head. Yes, but do you truly want her to carry this burden? After everything she's already endured. His eyes moved between Oberyn and Mors, who both flinched at that. Oberyn, are you certain? You're turning away from a kingdom. From your birthright. Oberyn managed a small, bittersweet smile. I'm certain. And we both know it. He glanced at Mors. He was born for this more than any of us. I'd rather put our future in his hands. Mors lowered his head into his hand, his voice barely more than a murmur. It wasn't supposed to be me, he said. Why did it have to be me? Doran, you weren't supposed to die. The hall had gone still. Servants and guards who'd overheard now stood motionless, watching. All eyes turned to Mors, Oberyn's, Lewin's, Manfredi's, Ormond's. Even the household guards looked at him with expectation. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then Mors straightened in his chair, meeting their gazes. His voice was quiet, but resolute. Very well. A heartbeat of silence, then the room erupted. Prince Mors. The Son of Dorne. The champion of the Seven. Oberyn smiled faintly through the tears still shining in his eyes. The Son of Dorne is back. End of Arc 4, Twilight of the Sun. Chapter 56, Interlude, A New Dawn. Mid-279 AC, King's Landing. 2 weeks after the rescue at Dragonstone. POVI Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The Tower of the Hand smelled faintly of wine and old parchment. One man stood by the tall window, looking out over the city as a faint breeze stirred his silver hair. A cup of wine rested lightly in his hand, its crimson surface rippling with each movement. Behind him, another man sat at his desk, studying the standing man with sharp, calculating eyes. His presence filled the chamber, commanding without effort. The thinning of his golden hair only emphasized the crown-like shape of his brow, a silent reminder of his authority. The silver-haired prince broke the quiet at last. He spoke without turning, but with clear purpose. "You see it now, Lord Hand, the madness that has taken hold of my father. To burn an heir of one of the great houses, who knows which heir is next?" He left the sentence unfinished, its weight hovered between them. Tywin Lannister watched him steadily. "Do not compare us to those falcons of the Vale," he said flatly. "We are lions. Had my heir been taken, I would have unleashed the Westerlands on King's Landing. Don't test me, Prince Rhaegar, speak plainly. What are you proposing?" Rhaegar's smile was small and controlled, the smile of a man who delighted in chess played with human pieces. He turned, set his glass on the desk, and "Saturday no games, Lord Hand. Only the continuation of our earlier arrangements." "That's right, I'm reminding him that we are still tied together. He's as much a traitor as I, but I am the heir," Rhaegar thought, a cold pleasure at the back of his throat. Tywin's expression narrowed. "Prince," he began carefully, choosing each word, "you are already married. Witnessed by the realm. It was only this year. Our agreement has ended." Rhaegar's smile widened a hair. "I do not deny it." He leaned forward, voice dipped in casual certainty. "But, my father's madness will splinter the realm. This war won't end easily, you know this. Robert Baratheon is just the beginning. Perhaps the king will die in the chaos, perhaps we will march in and claim what should be mine. Either way, when I sit on the Iron Throne I will need a queen, one who can secure my rule." Tywin's eyes flicked with the calculation of a man constantly measuring advantage and cost. "And Elia? She is with child. To set her aside. If it is a daughter, the problem is small," Rhaegar said, almost lazily. "If a son, he may be disinherited, take the Martell name. He could even be fostered with the Martells. Dorne and the Stepstones will be mollified by the prospect of family ties. So long as I keep Elia by my side, she can work as a political anchor, they will be less likely to rebel, afraid of what would happen to her." Tywin made no immediate answer, but the corners of his mouth tightened. He had not been unprepared for ambition, he merely wished to be certain it benefited him. A knock shattered the fragile calm. Tywin snapped, "I said not to be disturbed." "What is it?" A flunky opened the door, voice small and trembling. "My Lord Hand, Prince Rhaegar, the king has called you to court. At once." Rhaegar and Tywin exchanged a look, then rose together. "Curious," Rhaegar murmured. "Let us oblige his grace." The throne room. Rhaegar and Tywin entered the throne room, their footsteps echoing faintly beneath the vaulted ceiling. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and incense. There was no one here, save some members of the council and the king's guard. At the far end, the Iron Throne loomed, its jagged blades catching the torchlight like a crown of knives. They stopped at the foot of the dais and knelt in unison. "Your Grace," they said together, heads bowed low before King Aerys II Targaryen. The Mad King did not answer at once. His fingers twitched upon the arm of his throne, his eyes bright with feverish light as they darted between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin, sharp, and unpredictable. "Ah, my hand and my heir. Come to plot, or to beg? I wonder what new schemes you plot to have me killed." He kept murmuring, but it was incomprehensible. King Aerys sat slouched upon the Iron Throne, little more than a shadow of the man he once was. His robes hung loose over a frame grown gaunt, his silver hair had gone wild and matted, and his nails long, yellowed, curling like talons tapped restlessly against the blades of the throne. His head jerked up suddenly, as if he had not been talking to them and only noticed them now. "Ah, there you are, he rasped, voice cracking with glee. His eyes gleamed with a mad light. Tywin! Now that I see Rhaegar, I do not wish to see you. Begone! A thin, broken laugh escaped him, half cackle, half wheeze echoing through the silent hall as Tywin's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Tywin bowed and moved aside. Aerys's attention snapped to Rhaegar. Rhaegar! What is this I hear of a fight at Dragonstone? Rhaegar kept his face carefully benign. Your Grace, I am not certain of the details. Aerys pointed, and Varys, always near the candlelit edges, glided forward. Spider, tell him. Varys inclined his head. It seems there was a skirmish on Dragonstone, Prince Rhaegar. Witnesses say banners of the stepstones were seen. Rhaegar's composure did not waver openly, but a small calculation passed through his features as he glanced at Tywin. He answered in a tone of mock regret. A curious contest between kin, a mundane familial quarrel at most. He sighed openly, as if he had just been bested in a board game instead of armed conflict. Our cousin proved fleet-footed. I shall consider my reply. Aerys's face twisted through confusion to furious delight. Good. Very good. This is how dragons breed strength. But enough. I don't want us weaken. Kill Robert Baratheon first. No killing each other, maiming and injury is acceptable. Perhaps there are too few of us Targaryen left, too few. That boy Viserys needs to grow quickly. If only dragons still walked the sky, he regarded Rhaegar with sudden malice. Step it up, boy. Fail me and I may name Mors Targaryen heir instead of you. He laughed again, mad and careless. Rhaegar's hands tightened imperceptibly, hidden under his cloak. You dare, he thought, fury flaring and sinking like a blade. He bowed with the practiced ease of a man who wears his restraint like armor. Your son will not disappoint, Your Grace. Aerys waved them away. Dismissed. As Rhaegar departed, his mind raced not with rage at his father's threat, but with calculation. Elia's escape had shattered his initial design, yet Dorne and the Stepstones were only dangerous if they joined the rebels together. They could still be drawn back into his web, but Mors would need to be removed. Tywin Lannister's cooperation was essential, their ambitions aligned better than either would ever admit. And with Varys whispering in his favor, Rhaegar felt certain he could master the board. He was the prince that was promised, the one with divine glorious purpose. The faceless men refused my summons again. He thought, his jaw tightening. Perhaps the sorrowful men will prove more accommodating. End 279 AC River Run. After the routing of the rebel army. POV 2 Peter Baelish. Peter watched from the shadowed archway as Brandon Stark walked Catelyn Tully and Lisa Tully through the courtyard, their voices light, sunlight catching on her vibrant auburn hair. Every laugh pricked at him like a splinter. They were laughing as if the war hadn't reached their very gates. Every smile Catelyn gave Brandon felt like a knife twisting in his stomach. He should be out there fighting the loyalists, not charming my cat. Does he think this is a courtship tour? He watched Brandon brush a flower petal from her cheek. Then they held each other's eyes and Catelyn turned away, blushing. That was the moment the splinter broke. He had watched them enough, every tilt of a smile, every careless touch, and the envy had hardened into resolve. He was clever, even at 13 he knew how to read people and how to use them. For too long he'd restrained himself for the sake of honor and to not show such an ugly side to the Tullus who had taken him in, especially Brynden, whose care could almost be called father-like. But no more. He knew what he wanted now, Catelyn Tully. It was clear that Catelyn only saw him as a younger brother, but he would grow, and as long as Brandon wasn't in the picture, he would have her, and he had already worked out how. Brandon, how dare you touch my cat that way? I'll make sure you regret it. That night, cloaked and alone, he slipped through the camp to find the man he needed, the one people whispered about in fear and disgust. He found him by a half-lit tent, polishing his sword. The grin was already there, the one that never left his face. Even before he spoke, Peter knew it, the smiling knight. He hesitated, but it was too late to turn back. "Sire," he said quietly, trying to sound older than he was. The man didn't look up. "What do you want, boy?" His voice was calm, and amused. But Peter felt it was unusually eerie. "I have a task," Peter said, swallowing. "One that would suit your talents." The knight's head tilted, that smile cutting deeper. "Oh, do tell." Peter steadied his breath. "A great kill. One to make even the lords take notice. The heir of the north and his father." The smile widened. "Bold words from a little lord." "And why," he said, leaning closer, "would I do anything for you?" Peter met his gaze. "Because if you don't, some might learn that every man that has died mysteriously around camp does so," with a smile carved into his face. The words hung in the air like a blade. For the first time, the knight stopped smiling, then it returned, wider than before. He laughed, low and quiet. "So the cub thinks he's found his claws." He rose, slow and deliberate, towering over Peter. "You're clever." "I like clever." He closed the distance until Peter could feel his breath. Mirth curled his lips, but beneath it lay something cruel. The smell of iron clung to him. "Very well," he said softly. "Tell me where I'll find the wolf." Peter exhaled, half relief, half terror. He gave the knight just enough to keep him interested: names, habits, where Brandon liked to walk, who guarded Ricard's tent. The man listened intently, like a hunter memorizing a trail. When Peter finished, he turned to leave, desperate to be gone. But a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "One more thing," the knight whispered, his grin inches from Peter's ear. "Interest. For wasting my time if this turns out dull." Peter froze, throat tight. "Interest. This bastard, I'll make sure he is crushed after he kills those bastards for me." The knight chuckled, low and cruel. "Don't worry, little lord. Just enough to make sure you remember me. Just a little flesh, yes." "No," Peter tried to yell, but the knight shut his mouth, struck him in the stomach, then entered the tent with him. "Let's see, oh, I know, a bit of cheek, some brow, I." "No, no, please no. Stop, you bastard." Peter thought in pain, crying as the smiling knight did his work. Muffled screamed could barely be heard, but no one was around to hear it. Later, Peter stumbled back into his tent, trembling, many bruises darkening his face, especially around his eyes and jaw. He reached to where his left ear should have been, then trembling looked at the blood in his fingers. His plan had worked. The smiling knight would go after Brandon, but the cost, it had been more than he would have been willing to give. He sat in the dark until dawn, whispering to himself, "Next time, I'll be the one who smiles." Beginning of 280 AC. The Throne Room, King's Landing. After the defeat of the Loyalist army. POV 3 Aerys Targaryen. Varys's voice came thin and careful. And the Loyalist armies were shattered. Prince Mors's presence broke them, it's not clear how, but resistance collapsed with the remaining armies surrendering. Prince Rhaegar was mortally wounded and horribly disfigured. We do not yet know if he will live. Aerys cut him off with a rasp. Enough. Begone. All of you begone. The courtiers scattered like frightened birds. Even Sir Harlan Grandison, who lingered at the doorway, bowed and stepped out to take his post. Left alone, the king's muttering rose into a fevered pitch. Mors, oh, Mors! You betrayed me! Instead of blood, you sided with them. He slammed a hand down on the iron of the throne. The metal bit his palm, a ribbon of red welled up and trickled down his fingers. He watched it as if the sight fed him. Another cut, another wound, the betrayal. His voice flattened into a keening whisper, then snapped back to a terrible clarity. I don't care if Rhaegar dies, no. But to side with them, they will burn. All of them will burn. Aerys's eyes widened, his gaunt face split into a bright, Terrible smile, yellow teeth catching torchlight. Yes. Burn. Let it all burn. We will all burn. He called to the empty doorway. Harlan. The door opened and Sir Harlan Grandison entered, face hard with duty and loyalty to his king. You Ares croaked, smiling as if at a private joke. Call Grandmaster Rossart. Tell him to come. Tell him to be ready. Harlan Grandison bowed. At once, Your Grace. The door shut. Ares began to laugh softly at first, then growing and cracking until it became a high, manic peal that rolled off the stone and filled the hollow throne room. He laughed as the blood darkened the iron beneath him, and the sound echoed long after the courtiers had fled. Early 280 AC Dragonstone. After the explosion of King's Landing. POV for Varys. Nothing is going to plan. A plump, bald man with soft hands and rounded shoulders hurried down the corridor. He kept his face neutral, he always did when anyone watched. How did it all unravel until this point? He stopped before a bedroom. A mountain of a man stood guard outside, the new scars across his face only made him look more fearsome. Lord Commander, Varys said softly, I need to speak with Her Grace. Gerald Hightower gave a curt nod and stepped aside. Varys approached the door and knocked lightly. Your Grace, may I enter? A soft voice answered, Come in, Varys. Varys opened the door. On the bed sat the Queen of the Iron Throne, gently running her hands through the hair of the sleeping Prince Viserys, only 4 years old. Rhaella Targaryen still had the Valyrian beauty of her house, but she looked fragile. Old bruises from Ares's mistreatment lingered in the shadows beneath her skin. They leave marks that do not fade, Varys thought, with a small, quiet pity. Rhaella glanced up and raised a finger for silence. She caressed Viserys' cheek, then stood and walked to the patio with Varys in step behind. She sat then sighed heavily, as if preparing herself. What is it, Varys? You look troubled. Do we have more bad news? She asked softly. Varys bowed slightly. I'm afraid so, my queen. The Loyalists have reorganized, and I believe Robert Baratheon intends to finish off what they started. Fortunately, thanks to their infighting, the only significant fleet within the narrow sea to worry about is at White Harbor, and it would take some time for them to arrive. Prince Mors has returned to Dorne to bury his brother and has declared the Stepstones and Dorne independent. But, it won't be long before they come for us. Our 50 ships sound like many, but a war it could not win. Rhaella stared down at her lap. Do we truly need to leave? Varys said nothing. How is he? She asked at last. Varys tried for words, then shook his head. Tears slid down Rhaella's face. Can't we ask Mors for safe harbor? We are kin, cousins. Varys's expression darkened. I'm afraid, my queen, we are beyond such hope. If we mean to keep any hope of resurgence, exile is the only path. Her shoulders sagged. Between sobs she whispered, Thank you, Varys. For saving us. For everything. Varys inclined his head. It is my duty, my queen. I will excuse myself. He took one last look at Rhaella as he left. She sat small and broken in the candlelight, her sobs quiet and endless. Outside, letters waited, plans to be set in motion, troops to find. Varys tightened his jaw. Damn Ares, he muttered under his breath. Why burn King's Landing? It will make keeping the kingdoms together almost impossible. And damn that Mors. The war was meant to weaken the realm, not ruin it. He touched his lips as if tasting a name and sighed, then murmured aloud, We will find a way one way or another, House Blackfyre will regain its birthright. Early 280 AC Storm's End, the storm lands. POV Robert Baratheon. Damn those bastards! How dare they turn their backs? How dare they refuse me? Robert roared, flinging a heavy desk against the wall. Across the chamber Stannis ground his teeth. Edwin and Eldon Estermont stood silent, Hoster Tully sighed, and Brynden Tully watched with a look of quiet disappointment. "Robert," Hoster said, "now is not the time for this. There is much to do. If you mean to be king, you must declare it soon and finish the Targaryens. That will give you the legitimacy you need." Robert paced, voice raw. "Then what?" The Reach took advantage of the chaos and scurried back to their flowery fields. "Mace, that craven buffoon has declared himself king. King Mace. He styles himself a king, can you believe it? What is that if not an open challenge? Worse, he didn't secure the prisoners when he left. Tywin retreated to the Westerlands and has fortified his lands. Then Dennisarun went back to the Vale, saying their work is done. Nobody listens to me. And the North?" Hoster's jaw tightened. "Yes, the North. With Ricard dead from his wounds, their situation is precarious. They had to withdraw to ensure Brandon's succession. They were worried the Boltons would use this opportunity to spread dissent." Robert laughed, a strange, rough sound. "Of course. With Catelyn to secure the alliance, we wouldn't want trouble there, but even Ned left." He dropped into a chair, rubbing his brow. Silence settled. Edwin broke it. "Robert, perhaps now that King's Landing lies in ruin, you should style yourself properly as Storm King, ruling from Storm's End." Robert's eyes lit. He repeated the words, tasting them. "Storm King. Storm King." A grin spread across his face and then he rose with sudden vigor. "Yes. The Storm King. We'll bring back the old days like the Durandons of old. Hoster." He turned to Hoster. "I formally ask you to join me. I will allow the Tullus to style themselves princes of the Riverlands, with Stannis set to wed Lysa. We are family. Do you accept?" Hoster's eyes widened. He sank to one knee. "I hail the Storm King." Robert's smile widened until it seemed to split his face. "Good. Grandfather, send letters to the other realms. Give them a chance to bend the knee. If they do not, I will bring the storm to them and they will feel our fury. I will start with Dorne, those bastards." Stannis exhaled and rose, then left the chamber without a word. Robert's shouts continued behind the closed door. When he started raging about Prince Mors Martell, he did not stop for a long while. Early 280 AC Sunfort, the Stepstones. Arc 4 Epilogue. POV Ashura Dane. After ensuring that Melario and Little Arianne were secretly escorted back to Norvos, and presiding over his brother's funeral, Prince Doran, Mors delayed any formal matters of succession until he could see his newborn son and Elia's newborn daughter. The two had been born within a fortnight of each other, baby Doran Martell older than baby Nymeria Martell by 2 weeks. The process for Doran's funeral had been quick. Only a week, and after a few days of travel he finally arrived back to her that afternoon. Sonny was finally back at Sunfort. The moment his eyes fell upon his son, Ashura's heart nearly burst in joy as she witnessed their first meeting. Yet even through the joy she could see it, Mors had changed. His brother's death had cut too deep, and though he stood tall, something in him had gone still and quiet. It would take time for that wound to mend. Ashura, however, had her own idea of how to begin helping him heal. That night, when Mors entered their chambers, he found her waiting. Now recovered from childbirth, she wore an impossibly alluring outfit from Lys, the sort Mors had always favored. Her recovery had been remarkable. Both the maester and the midwives had been astonished. During her pregnancy she had often felt stronger than most women claimed to, but she'd thought little of it. Only after speaking with Elia had she realized something was different. Now, after giving birth, the change was unmistakable. She felt stronger, faster, clearer of mind. Her body healed quicker, her endurance greater, just as she had felt when touched by Mors's aura. It was something she meant to speak to him about soon. But not tonight. Tonight, she would bring back his fire. "You came back to me, like you promised." she said in a sensual tone, while lying across the bed. His steps faltered. He swallowed at the sight, then pushed a wide smile across his face. Like I said, there was no way I wouldn't see you and our child again. But I must say, Ashura, you're a vision. This will be a very long night. His voice low, it rattled with a hungry note. Oh, you have no idea, Ashura replied, mischief warming her tone. I promised you something special if you came back, and you've earned it. Mors smirked. You had my curiosity. Now you have my full attention. He extended his hand to her in invitation. That's good because we'll need it. She rose to meet his touch, smile widening. Girls, come out. The side door creaked open, and Alyssa and Malara stepped inside. Both wore gossamer silks from lists that left little to the imagination. Alyssa hesitant, Malara twirling with shameless pride. Mors blinked, lips parting. Ashura, what is this? She came close, tracing his cheek with her fingers. We are Dornish, my love. You need not worry, I would never bring strangers into our home, nor would I force others into something they don't want. But Alyssa and Malara, you know what they feel for you. And I know how much fondness you have for them, we are all very close. Mors's expression softened, torn between surprise and inevitability. He murmured softly, yes, we are Dornish. Ashura's eyes glinted. Look at them. Are they not beautiful? Mors looked and there was no denying it. Alyssa's strong, graceful form. Malara's delicate, playful charm. Both radiated devotion, and more. Ashura's hand slipped into his. Then let the night begin. Malara cheered, yay. I don't have to keep spying from the closet anymore. The three women stepped closer. Mors drew a long breath, the weight of the war, of what he'd lost and the unknown melting away, at least for this moment. It's good to be a prince, he murmured, as their laughter mingled with his and the chamber doors closed on the rest of the world. Fade to black. Chapter 57, Chapter Lee, The New Age Begins. The Chronicles of the New Age of Kings. By Archmaester Thalen of Old Town, written circa 316 AC. Chapter 13, in which the realm was sundered and the seven crowned once more. In the year 280 after Aegon's conquest, the doom of King's Landing came to pass. The blinding light that consumed the city left the heavens stained a sickly green, a grim beacon that marked the end of one age and the birth of another. From that fire rose a world remade, though few at first could grasp the breadth of what had been undone. In the wake of that cataclysm, King Mors Martell, then still styled Prince of Dorne, stood before Lord Robert Baratheon, Lord Hoster Tully, Lord Denys Arryn, and Lord Brandon Stark. There, before the assembled lords of what had been the Seven Kingdoms, he declared that Dorne and the Stepstones would henceforth stand apart, sovereign and free. From that hour, no crown in Westeros could claim dominion over the southern sands. Lord Robert's fury was said to have reverberated across the fields, yet with his armies shattered, his fleet destroyed, and Targaryen resistance yet unbroken, he could do little but seethe. He gathered what men remained to him and withdrew to Storm's End, there to wait upon the fleet of White Harbour before resuming his campaign. The declaration from Dorne sent ripples through the realm. In the Riverlands, Lord Mace Tyrell, acting as jailer over the Westerlands and Crownlands host, watched the distant green blaze that marked the fall of King's Landing. When word soon followed of Dorne's defection, he recognized the shifting tide and sought to salvage what remained of his fortunes. With 15,000 reachmen still under his banners and the rebel host too weakened and too weary to block his departure, Mace ordered an immediate withdrawal. Before departing, he released Lord Tywin Lannister, captured and crippled by Robert's hammer at the Trident, along with the 15,000 Westerlands men taken beside him. Both lords marched south and west in silence, their banners lowered, their pride broken, and their cause lost. Yet before parting, they forged a brief and uneasy pact of mutual defense born not of loyalty, but of survival. The remnants of the rebel allied host, scarcely 10,000 strong, could do naught to halt them. Those who remained turned their strength upon Dragonstone, where the last Targaryens were said to have fled. Yet when they arrived, the island fortress stood empty, its halls deserted, its cellars filled with traps and ash. The dragon's brood had vanished beyond reach, leaving only whispers and smoke. In the months that followed, peace of a sort returned. Lord Robert Baratheon, no longer bound to crown or council, named himself Storm King, reviving a title long thought buried in history. Lord Hoster Tully bent the knee to him, and was thereafter styled Prince of the Trident, in honour of his loyalty and station. To Robert's brother, Stannis Baratheon, were granted the burned remnants of the Crownlands, what little could be salvaged from the ruin of King's Landing and its surrounding keeps, reconstituted as the Principality of Dragonstone. From the scorched ruins of the capital and the ancient Targaryen seat of Dragonstone, he was charged to rebuild what fire had consumed and to rule what vassals yet remained. Far to the south, King Mors Martell and his kin united Dorne and the Stepstones beneath a single banner, styling themselves the Kings of Dorne, with the Stepstones established as the princely domain of the crown heir. Emboldened by their example, the great houses of Westeros followed one by one. Mace Tyrell crowned himself King of the Reach. Tywin Lannister, his wounds healed but his wrath unspent, took the crown of the Rock. In the north, Brandon Stark refused all entreaties of allegiance, and when pressed by his lords, accepted the ancient title of King of Winter. Thus the dire wolf rose again, as in the days before the conquest. The Ironborn had yet to claim their crown. Lord Quellan Greyjoy lay comatose from wounds taken in the war, and so a king's moot was called upon Old Wick. From it emerged Balon Greyjoy, chosen of the drowned god, who seized the driftwood crown and proclaimed the rebirth of the Iron Kingdom. At last, even Denys Arryn, seeing the shape of the new order, declared himself King of Mountain and Vale. So ended the hegemony of House Targaryen, after 280 years of rule. The dragon's fire had guttered out, and the Seven Kingdoms were kingdoms once more. Yet peace was fleeting. In the closing months of 280 AC, the Storm King led a host through the Stoneway Pass, seeking to humble Dorne by force of arms. For 3 months his banners clashed with the Sun's pair host, until the Martells broke his advance and drove him back across the mountains. Though no formal peace was signed, the borders fell silent once more by the turning of 281 AC. That same year, King Brandon Stark took to wife Lady Catelyn Tully, binding the rivers and the snows in alliance. In 283 AC, a darker whisper passed through the realm: Lord Tywin Lannister, now King of the Rock, was found dead of sudden illness or poison, as some claim. The Stormlands were quietly blamed, though no hand was ever proven, and the truth of the matter was never known. In the wake of his death, new alliances were swiftly forged. Prince Stannis Baratheon wed Lady Lisa Tully, while Lord Eddard Stark took to wife Alice Waynwood, cousin to Queen Alyssa of the Vale. And then, in the year 284 AC, came the scandal that cast its shadow over the new age of kings. Jaime Lannister, golden son of the Rock, scarcely 18, took his own twin sister, Cersei, to wife, crowning her queen beside him. Westeros shuddered at the deed. Septons decried it, maesters condemned it, yet none dared raise sword or standard against the wealth of the West. Thus the twins ruled together, king and queen of one body and one sin, while the rest of the realm looked on in silence, wondering what further chaos the new age of kings might bring. Mid-284 AC, the Water Gardens, Kingdom of Dorne. It was another warm day in Dorne, though the pools and fountains of the Water Gardens turned the heat into something almost divine. Sunlight rippled across clear water, scattering rainbows, and the air rang with the laughter of children. Beneath the shade of the orange trees, one of the marble pavilions reserved for the Martells and their guests stood unusually quiet. Mors Martell sat motionless, a furrow between his brows. A bead of sweat slid down his temple as he stared at the table before him. Oberyn and Manfrey Martell flanked him, both equally grim, their eyes fixed on the same object. No one spoke. The weight in the air felt almost funereal. Then, with a triumphant shout, the tension shattered. Race! The board game Queen of Dorne strikes again. Ha ha ha. Malara Hightower leapt to her feet, arms raised in victory, her laughter echoing through the pavilion. The men slumped where they sat defeated for the third time in a row. Her glee could have given the Mad King himself pause. Mors dragged a hand down his face. "Seven, help me." Oberyn groaned. "How does she keep doing it?" Manfredi threw up his hands. "Magic. I swear it's magic. I refuse to believe otherwise." Mors pushed his chair back. "That's it. I concede the field. I can't bear another loss today." Their lament drew laughter from the women nearby, until the cry of a baby softened the moment. A wet nurse approached with a small child whose clear blue eyes and pale platinum hair mirrored her father's. Luna Martell, 1 year old, the daughter of Mors and Malara. Malara rose at once, her grin melting into tenderness. "What is it, Luna? Did we wake you, my little sunbeam?" She gathered the child in her arms and carried her toward the shallow pools where the rest of the family played. At the edge sat Ashura Dane, holding 1-year-old Serena, and her near likeness, Alyria Dane, now 14, along with Alyssa Euler, Mellie Euler, and Jane Fowler, Manfredi's wife, who cradled the newborn Lyram Martell. Beside them were Silva Sant-Agar, wife of Bedwyck Euler, and Cyrenaico, holding 1-year-old Doran Martell, one of Oberyn's 2 young children with her. In the water, laughter rippled as the cousins, the 4-year-old Doran and Nymeria Martell, splashed with 8-year-old Maron and his betrothed, 5-year-old Ynys Yaronwood. Nearby, Oberyn's other children joined in, 7-year-old Tyene, 6-year-old Sorella, a surprise daughter he had discovered originating from his time in the Free Cities, and 3-year-old Doria. Along the edge toddled the youngest cousins, 3-year-old Daemon Euler, Bedwyck's son, and the 2-year-olds Oliver Martell, Manfredi's eldest, and Lorza Martell, Mors's daughter with Alyssa. The family had flourished, and the water gardens, once the quiet refuge of their ancestors, now overflowed with laughter, sunlight, and life. Mors, Oberyn, and Manfredi had claimed a quiet corner of the pool to lounge in. Bedwyck Euler joined them after a few laps in the deeper water, settling beside them with a grin. The 4 men watched the happy chaos unfolding nearby, drinks in hand and sunlight glinting off the water. Manfredi sighed contentedly. "Ah, this is so nice. I can't believe it's already been a month. I really don't want to go back to the Stoneway." Oberyn smirked. "You don't have to. You could still join us for the tourney at Highgarden. There will be flowers, and more flowers, maybe even some extra flowers." Manfredi and Bedwyck burst out laughing while Mors only shook his head, smiling faintly. Bedwyck turned toward him. "We should be expecting the Starks in 2 weeks, right?" Mors nodded. That's the plan. They'll visit, stay with us for a week, and then we'll travel together to the tourney. It should be interesting. I haven't seen Brandon since the war. We'll have a lot to discuss besides trade. It's time I bring Brandon in on what is to come." Mors thought solemnly. Oberyn tilted his head curiously. "So, any idea what this Council of Kings is really about?" He made exaggerated quotation marks with his fingers. Manfredi and Bedwyck both looked to Mors, their amusement fading into curiosity. Mors gave a wry smile and a small shrug. "I'm not completely sure. But there are likely a few main topics: trade between the kingdoms, for one. And possible threats, like the Ironborn. They've become a major nuisance to the western coast, harassing the Reach, the Rock, the Trident, even the North. Only the Reach and the Rock have any fleet worth mentioning, and even that might not be enough. As for the other subjects, I'm not certain yet." Oberyn leaned back with a grin. "Honestly, it sounds like a dull affair. Serena and I will probably find some flowers to entertain ourselves with. Maybe I'll join the tilts and represent Dorne. The gods know if the Sun of Dorne takes the field, everyone will just quit." He finished with a laugh. Mors sighed. "That's been one of the byproducts of showing my power. Now I'm revered by many of the faithful, and few dare face me in the lists, whether out of fear or reverence. "Yes," he said, "it's unfortunate that I can't participate. But it should be entertaining nonetheless. At least the rest of you lesser beings get a chance to shine." That earned a round of laughter from them all. The caravan made its way back to Sun's Pair. King Mors Martell rode at the front on Vezar, with Oberyn, Manfrey, and Bedwick beside him. They were flanked by Lord Commander Barristan Selmy of the Eclipse Guard, Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Garth Hightower, Sir Horan, Sir Kale, and Sir Darrow. The Eclipse Guard had been reorganized into an elite Royal Guard 10 King's Guard, each commanding 10 men under their charge. The force operated in close coordination with the expanded Spears of the Sun, now 1,000 strong and once again led by Prince Lewin Martell as Captain General, with Prince Oberyn Martell serving as his vice-captain. Together, they stood ever ready, trained, disciplined, and prepared for any specialized mission. Since Sun's Pair was not far, it wasn't long before a bustling new city came into view, the new capital city of Dorne, Sunhaven. Dorne had become one of the wealthiest kingdoms in Westeros thanks to its booming glass production and trade, and much of that wealth had gone into the city's creation. Oberyn glanced around as they rode. "I can never stop being impressed by these towers of yours, Mors. Windcatcher's a fitting name. The way they draw in the air and cool the city, simply brilliant." Mors nodded. "With the amount of gold poured into designing and perfecting them, I only hope they're worth the cost." Manfrey grinned. All across Dorne, every city is installing them. Life is changing, especially in the desert towns. This is a revolution." Mors smiled at that. "If Narration is right, we may soon be able to sell them to the free cities. It could become one of our major exports." The caravan continued onward and soon arrived at Sun's Pair. After dismounting, Sir Jeremy Norwich and Sir Ormond Euler came forward to receive them. "Welcome back, Your Grace," Jeremy greeted with a bow. "I trust you enjoyed your respite." Mors nodded as they walked toward his solar. "It was good. Though I'm disappointed you never joined us. You still hold the best record at race." "By virtue of never playing." Jeremy smiled faintly. "Yes, that was my brilliant strategy." They both laughed. Mors asked suddenly, "Have you notified the council?" Ormond bowed his head. "Of course, Your Grace. As soon as we saw you arriving, I sent people to inform them." Mors nodded, visibly relieved. "Good. Thank you, Uncle Ormond. I'd much rather review what I've missed now than wait any longer." After a brief pause, he added, "How are Elia and Karen?" "They've been well. They're currently in the gardens with their son," Jeremy replied. "Elia's health has been excellent since you helped her. No issues at all since giving birth earlier this year." "Good," said Mors. "She should have come with us, but as long as she's happy, that's all that matters." In truth, Elia and Sir Karen Toland had formed a deep friendship that gradually became something more, not entirely formal, yet far from casual. When it became clear that Elia was with child, Karen had confessed the affair and asked for judgment, believing he had failed his vows as a king's guard. He had even offered to accept imprisonment to atone. But Mors reminded him that, unlike the old order, the new Eclipse Guard were not forbidden from taking wives or raising families. Soon after, Elia and Karen married. Their children would bear the Martell name, and Karen was reassigned as her personal King's Guard, a solution Mors considered a win for everyone. After taking their seats, they didn't have to wait long for the small council to arrive. Once all the available small council members had gathered, Mors leaned back in his chair and looked around the table. "Since no urgent matter reached me at the Water Gardens, I trust there were no major problems." Jeremy, serving as Hand of the King, replied, "None, Your Grace. Everything was handled without issue. No major concerns to report." Mors nodded. "Good." He turned to Ormond. Ormond, Master of Law, spoke with confidence. "No issues we couldn't resolve. Sunhaven is coming along perfectly. The designs we planned have been followed with minimal setbacks. The influx of people was greater than we predicted, but with the city guard maintaining order, there have been no disturbances. Aside from that, no problems. Mors smiled. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Uncle, this is important. I want Sunhaven to become the greatest city in Westeros. If you encounter any issues, tell me at once. Ormond bowed. As you wish, Your Grace. Mors then turned to his treasurer. Lady Naerys, how are our coffers? Any word from the Free Cities about the wind catchers? Naerys nodded proudly. The heavy expenditures have mostly ended. With the city producing on its own, we've added another major source of income. The tolls to cross the stepstones remain one of our most profitable ventures, especially now that the other kingdoms must pay. As for the wind catchers, representatives from Volantis, Pentos, and Bravus are due to arrive in just over a month. They wish to see them in person before negotiating to acquire them. Mors smiled. Excellent. That should stabilize everything soon. Keep up the good work, Naerys. He then turned to his master of arms. Lord Beric, how goes the training? Beric Dane nodded. Your Grace, progress continues well. Excluding the spears, we can field 36,000 men consistently with potentially 20,000 more for garrison. As per your order, 12,000 remain standing at all times, 4,000 along the Stoneway, 4,000 at the Prince's Pass, and 4,000 around Sun's Pair. Every 4 months, we rotate 12,000 more to rest. We've also been coordinating closely with the spears and the fleet to keep everyone drilled. Mors smiled faintly. Thank you, good father. Keep up the good work. I trust Ulrich has been leading Starfall well in your absence. Beric laughed. Of course. He's done admirably. I couldn't be prouder of him. Mors then turned to Sir Davin Quar, Master of Ships. Davin, how goes it? Davin bowed. Your Grace, all remains stable. Our 600 warships are a formidable deterrent in the narrow sea, and we've had no major incidents. However, we've noticed an uptick in small skirmishes with Tyroji vessels. Nothing serious yet, but I've dispatched Captain Davos to patrol the area. Mors furrowed his brows. Tyrosh has grown too strong since absorbing Myr. Are they becoming greedy for more? He muttered rhetorically. Then he looked to Auraborne. Any word from Tyrosh? Auraborne, the spy master of external affairs, shook his head. They've been cracking down on spies, so information has been scarce, but that alone speaks volumes. Combined with the new ships they're building in Myr, I suspect they're preparing for something. We should be ready in case it involves us. Mors nodded toward Davin, who returned the gesture in silent understanding. Since Sienna isn't here, I'll speak with her later, Mors said. Anything else? Sir Barristan, you were with me, so I doubt there's much. Uncle Lewin. Lewin shook his head. Nothing, Your Grace. Lord Beric covered it. Maester Torvian cleared his throat. Your Grace, a letter arrived earlier today from the Stormlands. Mors frowned. The Stormlands? Let me see. The Maester handed him the scroll. Mors broke the seal and read, then couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Amazing. We've had no communication since we thoroughly defeated them 3 years ago, and now Robert has the gall to invite me to his wedding with Princess Lyanna Stark. The letter almost reads like he's gloating. Barristan frowned. Your Grace, do you intend to go? We're technically still at war. Mors shook his head. Had it been anyone else, I wouldn't bother. But for Brandon and Ned's younger sister, I may need to consider it for their sake. Auraborne looked intrigued. I'm surprised it's still happening. My understanding is that Princess Lyanna despises King Robert for his philandering ways. Mors shrugged. I'm sure she wouldn't choose it. Beneath all that warlike charisma, Robert is a degenerate truant, drinking, eating, whoring. But in this new age, alliances matter more than affection. Lewin's lips twitched. Is that so, Your Grace? Then remind me who are our allies. Mors chuckled. No one said alliances must be sealed by marriage, uncle. The Mountain and Vale, and the North, could be considered good allies. And fortunately, my name alone serves as a deterrent. Lewin rolled his eyes, though the faint smile on his face betrayed his amusement. Mors looked around the table. If there's nothing else, then meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Mors made his way to his chambers and collapsed onto his bed without even removing his clothes. Half an hour later, the door opened and something small launched onto his back like a catapult. Hiya! Oh! Durin, you're getting too heavy to do that, Mors groaned, turning around just in time to grab the boy and start tickling him mercilessly. How's that? Can my little knight withstand my ultimate technique? I'll have you know, I'm renowned across the 7 kingdoms for this move. Ha ha ha! I yield! I yield! Ah ha ha ha! Durin gasped between laughs. Oh, what is this? To witness such a mighty duel between the great and small dragons of Dorne, surely only I, Ashura, am worthy of the honor. Ashura declared in mock solemnity from the doorway. Mors stopped tickling, letting Durin catch his breath. Haha, you win this match, the day is yours, Durin said dramatically, but I'll return and that day will be. He broke off with a yelp as Mors twitched his fingers threateningly, pretending to go for another tickle. Ah! Durin leapt off the bed and bolted from the room, laughter echoing down the corridor as a king's guard and a pair of servants hurried after him. Mors chuckled and shook his head. Ashura smiled, stepping closer. He's like a miniature version of you, she said softly, wrapping her arms around him. Mors kissed her forehead. And Serena is a miniature version of you, he said with a grin. The sound of children's laughter echoed faintly from down the hall, followed by a sudden crash. Oops! The statue just came out of nowhere. Young Durin was heard saying. Ashura and Mors exchanged a look, then burst out laughing, shaking their heads. Well, Ashura sighed, still smiling, let's go see what needs replacing now, Sonny. And so, the new age began. Chapter 58, Chapter LIII, a stark contrast. Mid-284 AC Sun's Pair, Kingdom of Dorne. It was a warm day. The heavy Dornish sun pressed down upon the sand, its heat shimmering in waves that distorted the horizon. Through the haze, a line of carriages emerged, moving slowly toward Sun's Pair. At last, the Stark host dismounted from the Dornish coaches that had borne them from the port. Leading the procession was the Lord Hand, Sir Jeremy Norwich, having gone to receive them and now guiding them toward the grand entrance of Sun's Pair where King Mors Martell and his family awaited their arrival. Mors stood with a welcoming smile beside Queen Ashura Dane and her sisters in all but blood, Ladies Malara Hightower and Alyssa Euler. Prince Durin Martell fidgeted beside his father, while Ashura, Malara and Alyssa each cradled a babe, Serena, Luna, and Lorza. To the side waited the extended Martell family and their closest lords and friends. Lord Beric Dane stood beside Lady Alyria, who watched the approaching northerners with quiet curiosity. Prince Manfredi lingered with his family, while Oberyn was surrounded by his lively brood. Elia stood beside him, flanked by Lord Bedwick Euler. Behind them, the Eclipse Guard Sir Barry Stan Selmy, Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Garth Hightower, and Sir Karen Toland stood in gleaming white, the solemn shadow of the royal household, lending the gathering a dignity befitting a king's court. Oberyn smirked. I hope the other Starks can handle the Dornish heat. I'd hate to have to toss them into the fountain to cool off like we did with Ned. Bedwick fought to keep a straight face at the memory. Elia turned to her brother, eyes blazing. Oberyn! You're an adult. Don't jest when the king of another realm is about to dismount with his family. Don't make Mors look bad. Oberyn lifted his hands in mock surrender. I give, I'll behave. Yet the grin that followed made several present want to strike him. Mors glanced toward his brother's antics, then to the gathered kin and lords before turning back to his wife, lovers, and children with a quiet smile. My family, he thought, warmth softening his features. King Brandon Stark approached first with his queen, Catelyn Tully, who carried their 2-year-old son, Prince Rickard Stark. Walking just behind them was Princess Lyanna Stark, looking around son's pair with wonder. By all accounts, she should have been at Storm's End to spend time with King Robert Baratheon before her upcoming marriage later that year, but it seems she's been very resistant to leave Winterfell and spend time with her betrothed. Prince Benyon Stark followed, though his attention was clearly elsewhere, fixed on Alyria Dane, whose smile seemed to have robbed him of both composure and footing. He stumbled mid-step, drawing a chuckle from the Dornish onlookers. Mors caught the exchange and leaned slightly toward Ashura, smirking. Looks like the youngest Stark has fallen for Rhea's charms. Ashura returned the smirk, pride in her tone. Of course. She's practically a smaller version of me. I'd be disappointed if they didn't look. Too bad she's more interested in swords and forming her Queen's Guard for me than in romance. Finally, as a Stark must always remain in Winterfell, Prince Eddard Stark had stayed behind with his wife, Lady Alice Waynwood, daughter of the Lady of Iron-Oaks and cousin to Queen Alyssa Waynwood, wife of King Denys. Brandon reached them at last. Mors stepped forward with open arms. By bread and salt, I extend the peace of my table and the warmth of my roof. Brandon smiled and bowed his head. And by bread and salt, I honor your peace and keep it. The two clasped forearms in a soldier's greeting. King Brandon, said Mors, grinning, it's been a long while. I'm glad you could finally make it down here. So much has changed since we last met. Brandon chuckled wistfully. Much indeed. We've all had to grow up and lead our realms, though you started long before the rest of us. They shared a laugh at that, memories briefly softening their expressions. Mors gestured to his family. I'm sure I don't need to introduce Ashura, that's how we met, after all. He shot Brandon a teasing grin that drew a flicker of cold sweat from the Northern King and a curious glance from Queen Catelyn. This here is my little son dragon, Prince Doran Martell. And these are my princesses, Serena, Luna, and Lorza. Brandon smiled warmly. Well met. I see son's pair overflows with new life. Catelyn, still studying the Dornish gathering, spoke hesitantly. Dorne truly is different. Even the bastards stand beside the true-born children without issue. Her remark drew laughter from the Martells, leaving her bewildered. Apologies, Queen Catelyn, Mors said, amused. Yes, Dorne is different. We love more freely, live more openly, and embrace all as equal, but to correct you, none of my children are bastards. They are all trueborn. I don't understand, she said, confusion deepening. Ashura smiled gently. What Mors means is that Malara and Alyssa are my sisters. His children with them are recognized as such, bearing the Martell name. I am the queen and first wife, yes, but their bonds are just as real. Malara lifted Luna proudly. The Sun of Dorne warms us all. Catelyn blinked as if question marks were popping above her head. But then what about them, she asked, pointing at Oberyn's gathered children. Oberyn spread his arms with mock grandeur. What about them? They're perfect. He ruffled young Mayron's hair, earning an indignant pout from the boy. Mors chuckled. However they were born, they're my nieces and nephews. They carry my blood, and that makes them Martell's family. In Dorne, no one is judged for the circumstances of their birth. And if legitimacy ever became necessary. He allowed a teasing pause, his smile turning easy and confident. Well, it just so happens the one with the power to grant it is me. Brandon raised a calming hand to his wife. Easy, Cat. Different realm, different ways. Catelyn bowed her head quickly. My apologies, King Mors. I meant no offense. Mors waved a hand dismissively, his tone warm. None taken. We're well aware the rest of the realm views things differently to the Dornish. Lyanna, watching the exchange with interest, folded her arms and smirked. That's right, Queen Tully, you should calm down. And since the champion of the Seven himself approves of it, maybe we should adopt their custom too. Her tone dripped with mischief. Catelyn looked horrified at the idea, which sent Oberyn into a fit of laughter. Oh, I like her, he said. The pup's got spunk. Mors shook his head, chuckling. All right, let's get our guests settled. We'll have a feast later. As the party began moving toward the palace, Brandon lingered. Can we talk now? He asked. With this council of kings approaching and your letter speaking of important matters for the north and all of Westeros, my curiosity's been gnawing at me since I first read it. I'd rather not wait until morning. Mors arched a brow. You've just arrived. You'd rather not rest first. Brandon waved the notion away. Plenty of time for rest later. Mors grinned. Very well. Let's go to my solar. We've just perfected a new drink I think you'll enjoy. A moment later, they arrived at the king's solar and took their seats. Mors went to his dispensary, unlocked a small ornate chest, and drew out a bottle of amber liquid. He poured it carefully into 2 carved crystal glasses. A new Dornish creation, he said, handing one to Brandon. Made from the finest Dornish ingredients with a few rare elements the Hightowers helped us source. After much trial and error, we finally perfected the distillation. Brace yourself, it's got far more bite than that northern wine you're used to. Brandon arched an eyebrow, eyeing the drink with curiosity. He lifted it, gave it a brief sniff, then took a cautious sip. His eyes widened. 7 hells, smoother than I expected, he said, letting out a low whistle. But that aftertaste, it burns like fire. Mors smiled, clearly pleased. It's the honey from the water gardens. The bees feed on citrus blossoms, that's what gives it that sharp finish. Every drop's worth its weight in gold. We'll sell a cheaper blend through Old Town Reach honey for Reach purses, but this one stays Dornish. Sunfire Reserve, we call it. Exclusive to Sun's pair, can't be acquired anywhere else. He paused, his grin turning sly. It'll remain a rare and limited reserve, he said lightly, though, for the right price, I might be persuaded to part with a case or 2. Brandon chuckled. So you've found a way to make peace profitable. Peace, Mors said, swirling the glass, is always easier to sell when it tastes like this. Brandon took another slow sip, savoring it. Might you be willing to part with some for me? Already done, Mors replied. A case will be loaded onto your ship before you leave. But if you want more... Brandon smirked. Then perhaps we'll speak of trade. A little Dornish fire could warm the north nicely. Let's speak more on it later this week, Mors said, raising his glass toward Brandon in a friendly salute. Perfect. Brandon also raised in glass, then leaned back, finishing his glass with a satisfied sigh. Silence settled for a moment, comfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then his tone shifted, quiet but intent. So, he said, meeting Mors's eyes. What is this important matter you wrote of? If anyone else had sent such a message, I wouldn't have thought much about it, but coming from you. Mors leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. That's the case. Tell me, Brandon, what do you know of dragon dreams? Brandon blinked, caught off guard by the question. He gave a small, uncertain laugh. You know, that always sounded like old Nan tales to me. He paused, realizing Mors might not know the name. Old Nan was our caretaker in Winterfell. We grew up hearing her stories, some frightening, some absurd, but with what I've seen in recent years, maybe there's truth in a few of them. He leaned forward, thoughtful now. If I remember correctly, one of the Targaryens had that gift. It's what allowed them to escape the doom, isn't it? Mors nodded. That's the heart of it. Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the destruction of old Valyria in her sleep. Her family believed her, left everything behind, and fled to Dragonstone. When the doom came, they were the only dragon lords who survived. The lesson, Brandon, isn't just in the dream, it's that her kin listened. Brandon studied him in silence, the weight of understanding dawning. His expression hardened into seriousness. Mors, are you implying you have that ability? His voice lowered, uneasy. And he stopped as realization hit, eyes widening. 7 hells, you've seen something. Something that concerns the north, and all of Westeros. Mors's smile was faint, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's right, he said quietly. Brandon, almost impatient, said, well, don't keep me in suspense, what is it? Mors looked straight at him. The long night. Brandon froze, the color draining from his face. The long night? As in the White Walkers. Mors nodded once, solemnly. It will come again. He stood abruptly and began pacing, his mind racing. Mors remained seated, nursing his drink, giving him time to process. Brandon muttered to himself, so it's true, gods, if it's true they'll come from beyond the wall. Then the wall, it needs to be reinforced. The Night's Watch has fallen to ruin, and now with the kingdoms divided. He stopped, realization striking. I even took the gift from them. Brandon, Mors said quietly. Brandon. The Northern King finally stopped pacing, exhaling sharply. Sorry, he sat down heavily and finished his drink in one gulp. Mors nodded solemnly. I know. I've been preparing for a long time. Brandon looked up, surprised. Mors's expression didn't waver. The High Towers are with me, Mors continued. They've been preparing quietly as well. It's one of the reasons I avoided needless killing during the war. We'll need every man we can muster, especially Northerners. Brandon leaned forward. You have a way, then? Some plan to stop them? Mors hesitated. Not completely. I know they're vulnerable to Valyrian steel, but much else remains uncertain. We need more study and more testing. Lord Leighton has been helping from Old Town, but we'll need to expand that work. Reinforcing the wall will be important, yes, but not just with men. I've developed strategies that allow for rapid response to threats. I'll share them with you during the week. But at some point. He looked up, meeting Brandon's eyes. We'll need to send an expedition beyond the wall. Brandon's voice dropped to a whisper. To find one. Mors nodded. Brandon rubbed his brow, processing the enormity of it all. And Benyon was actually considering joining the watch. He let out a humorless laugh. To think I might see this in my lifetime. Wait, it is in my lifetime, isn't it? Mors rubbed his chin in thought. I'm not certain. Dragon dreams are never clear. But I know I'll be there when it comes. I estimate around the turn of the century. Brandon's eyes widened. 15 to 20 years. Mors nodded silently, then refilled their glasses. Brandon stood for a moment, deep in thought, before finally sitting again. He didn't touch his drink right away. When he did, it was with resolve. Then the North will stand with Dorne, he said firmly. We'll follow your lead, whatever must be done. For the future of my family, the North, and all of Westeros. Mors smiled faintly, raising his glass. Then for the future of our families, Dorne and Westeros. Their glasses met with a soft chime. Brandon took a long breath. We'll need the other realms involved. Mors agreed. I'll work on Dennis. The Council of Kings will be a good place to connect with him and the others. You can speak with your good father, Hoster Tully. Leighton will manage the Reach, though Olenna may only care for profit and advantage for now. The Rock and the Storm lands. He shook his head. We'll see. As for the Iron Isles, we can forget about them. The two kings remained in quiet discussion until the hour of the feast drew near, forcing them to postpone further talk. Unseen by the world, they had begun to shape the defense of a realm that did not yet know it was at war. As Mors made his way to his chambers to change for the feast, he stopped short near the training grounds. Below, in the sunlit yard, Alyria Dane was sparring with Lyanna Stark. The rhythmic clatter of wooden swords echoed through the warm afternoon air. Several onlookers had gathered around the railing. The ladies watched with a mix of curiosity and alarm. Ashura Dane stood beside Catelyn Tully and Alyssa Euler, while Benyon Stark hovered near the edge, visibly anxious. Sir Arthur Dane stood nearby, arms crossed, keeping a watchful eye to ensure the match didn't go too far. As Mors approached, he caught part of the conversation. "Maybe we should stop this," Catelyn said, wringing her hands. "If they were to get hurt." Alyssa cut in, smiling. "Don't worry, Queen Catelyn. Alyria's been training with some of the best knights in the realm: Arthur Dane, Barry Stan Selmy, even King Mors himself. She can handle herself. And from the looks of it, though Princess Lyanna's style is a little unrefined, she's got raw talent." Catelyn sighed softly. "Yes, but she's a lady, and soon to be a queen. This isn't proper." Mors joined them just then, amused. "What's not proper, Queen Catelyn?" "Having the ability to defend themselves." Catelyn faltered, searching for a reply, but only shook her head, murmuring, "It's just different." Mors smiled faintly and turned his gaze toward the field. The two girls circled each other, wooden swords raised. Alyria, barely 5'4", reminded him strikingly of a young Ashura. Though where Ashura had eventually outgrown her tomboy years, Alyria seemed to lean further into them. Her pale, sun-touched skin, violet eyes, and dark hair gave her a dangerous sort of beauty, something halfway between innocence and intensity. Benyon, of course, was staring outright, mouth slightly open, eyes wide. Mors smirked. "Careful, boy, or a fly will." The thought wasn't finished before Benyon jerked back with a startled cough, swatting at his mouth. "Seven save me," Mors thought, fighting a grin. It actually did. Lyanna, on the other hand, radiated wild energy. Her long, dark hair spilled freely down her back, as untamed as her movements. She was taller, about 5'7", slim and athletic, her grey eyes sharp with concentration. She lacked Alyria's refinement, but her speed and spirit made up for it. Every strike came from instinct and passion. The girls exchanged blows in quick succession until Alyria deftly turned aside a thrust and tapped Lyanna's shoulder. Lyanna stepped back, breathless but grinning. "Let's go again. I'll win this time." "Maybe tomorrow, Princess," Mors called out, still smiling. "We've a feast waiting, and it'd be a shame to miss it." Lyanna turned to him eagerly. "King Mors, can I train with your King's Guard like Alyria does?" "Lyanna," Catelyn began, flustered. "Let's not put his grace on the spot." "Nonsense," Mors said easily. "As long as they're willing, I won't forbid it. You can join our daily training if you wish. Alyria can show you the ropes." Lyanna brightened instantly. "Yes. Thank you, King Mors. Could we spar too? Eddard and Brandon wouldn't stop talking about how good you are." Mors laughed, shaking his head. "We'll see how tomorrow goes." Lyanna beamed, turning back to Alyria, who offered her a respectful nod. The onlookers began to disperse as the sun dipped lower over Sun's pair, and Mors finally continued on his way, smiling to himself at the thought that, between the wolf and the star, the next generation was already sharpening its claws. The feast that evening was intimate yet lively. Mors found himself seated beside Queen Catelyn, and though many of her views were more conservative than his taste allowed, he had to admit she was a thoughtful conversationalist, sharp, polite, and loyal. As long as Brandon didn't saddle her with a bastard, he supposed she would remain sane enough. He smiled faintly. Whatever his memories from another life said about her, this was reality, not some show. King Brandon, for his part, had grown into a fine man. His maturity was clear for all to see, yet he still carried the easy charm of a natural leader somewhere between Mors's measured poise and Oberyn's flair for mischief. Mors couldn't help but be amused watching young Benyon Stark 17 and clearly smitten try to strike up conversation with Alyria Dane. Somehow, it had turned into a sparring match that ended with Benyon red-faced and breathless while Alyria barely looked winded. Brandon shook his head more than once at his brother's antics, though Mors could sense the pride beneath his exasperation. Brandon had mentioned earlier that Benyon had spoken of joining the Night's Watch, an idea both he and Eddard opposed. Bringing him south, Brandon hoped, might broaden the boy's horizons, and perhaps his sense of reason. The feast ended without drama, but it left both families closer than before. Catelyn, though initially uneasy about Dorne's open customs and its many so-called bastards, had softened by night's end. Seeing the affection the Martells shared with their kin, trueborn or not, forced her to quietly question a few of her northern certainties. The days that followed passed swiftly. Lyanna joined the morning drills, her enthusiasm winning over even the gruffest of guards. On the second morning, she finally got her wish, a sparring match with Mors himself. She fought hard, fierce and smiling, and when he disarmed her with an easy twist, he could swear he saw stars in her eyes. Malara and Alyssa later took Alyria and Lyanna riding through the dunes, joined by Naerys, who laughed freely for the first time in months. One afternoon was spent at the water gardens, the sound of children's laughter echoing off marble and fountains. They also toured Sunhaven, and even the northerners so used to snow and stone were taken aback by the new city's harmony. The streets ran clean and ordered, cooled by the towering wind catchers that turned the desert heat into living breeze. Every face they passed seemed open, proud, and content. By the week's end, when the time came to depart aboard the Dornish Sun for Old Town and the great tourney, Lyanna lingered at the docks, her expression wistful. The she-wolf of Winterfell had found a piece of herself in the warmth of the south, and for a fleeting moment, even she seemed reluctant to let go. Chapter 59, Chapter Live, The March at Dawn. Mid-284 AC Old Town, Kingdom of the Reach. The Martell Stark host reached Old Town by late afternoon, where the great white tower of the High Towers rose above the whispering sound like a pillar of light guiding their path. The city beneath it shimmered in the dying sun, its marble streets alive with color, banners fluttering in the sea breeze, and bells echoing faintly from the harbor. Awaiting them at the gates stood Lord Leighton Hightower, tall and composed with a warm smile, his silver-streaked hair catching the last rays of daylight. Beside him were his heir, Sir Baelor Hightower, and Baelor's wife, Lady Alice Rowan, along with Leighton's second wife, Lady Rhea Florent. With them stood his youngest children, Linus, 12, Gunthor, 10, and Humphrey, 8, each arranged with the practiced grace of a great house receiving kings. As the procession halted, Leighton stepped forward and bowed with solemn precision, his voice carrying easily over the courtyard. King Mors, King Brandon, and your honored families and guests, welcome to Old Town. It is my great pleasure to receive you within my walls. His Grace, King Mace Tyrell, has entrusted me to guide your party to Highgarden. You shall find rest and comfort in my halls tonight, and at first light, we march for Highgarden. The carriages are prepared. Mors smiled, clasping the older lord's forearm in greeting. Leighton, it's good to see you again. And Baelor, congratulations on your marriage to Lady Alice. I remember her father well from the war. Lord Mathis is an honourable man. Baelor inclined his head with quiet pride and warmth. You honour me, your grace. The match has been a blessing, and my son already tries to steal my sword whenever I'm not looking. Mors arched a brow, the corner of his mouth twitching. 7 save us, he's proud his infant is playing with Valyrian steel, he thought wryly, though a faint smile still tugged at his lips. Alice added with a gentle smile, and I thank you, King Mors, for the mercy shown during the war. My lord father never forgot the dignity you and Dorne afforded him and his men while they were in your custody. Mors's expression softened. War is a terrible thing, he said. It forces decent men who might have shared wine and friendship to raise steel against each other. I take no joy in that. Sensing the tone grow somber, Ashura curtsied gracefully and interjected with a bright smile. "Thank you for your welcome, my lords. We are all quite happy to finally be on land again." Brandon Stark followed with a nod. "Well met, Lord Leighton, Lord Baelor, Lady Rhea, Lady Alice." Catelyn smiled warmly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the Lord of the High Tower and his lovely family." Then, breaking all sense of formality, a delighted voice pierced through the air. "Daddy!" Leighton's dignified composure dissolved at once as Malara ran forward and threw her arms around him. The usually solemn lord laughed aloud, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "My moonbeam! Look at you, you shine brighter than the beacon itself." Mors could barely hold his composure when he noticed the odd looks the Starks were now giving Leighton Hightower. Malara grinned. "And you've gone grayer. Come on, your granddaughter's waiting to see you." Lady Rhea laughed softly, her tone teasing but kind. "My lord husband, perhaps we might continue this reunion indoors, say, during the feast." Leighton cleared his throat, regaining a measure of his poise though not his smile. "A fine suggestion, my dear. Come, my royal guests, the High Tower is yours for the night." After a relaxed and convivial feast, where both parties had a chance to speak freely and grow acquainted, Lord Leighton Hightower, Sir Baelor Hightower, King Brandon Stark, and King Mors Martell climbed the long spiral of the High Tower to the Lord's solar. The great windows framed Old Town aglow beneath the stars, the beacon's fire burning steady above. Brandon spoke first, his tone warm. "Lord Leighton, thank you again for your hospitality. Catelyn felt quite at home here and my sister and brother enjoyed themselves immensely." Leighton smiled as he poured them each a drink. "It was my pleasure, your grace. I always enjoy receiving honorable guests, especially kings who still remember courtesy." Baelor, now a touch more relaxed, couldn't resist. "Father, you say that as if we've had kings lining up at our gates." Leighton shot him a withering look. Baelor immediately turned toward the window, suddenly fascinated by a passing bird. Mors chuckled under his breath, shaking his head in quiet amusement. Brandon's brow lifted as he recognized the amber liquid. "Is that Sunfire Reserve?" he asked, glancing between Leighton, Mors, and Baelor. Mors smirked. "Of course. We worked together to bring it to life. The first batch went straight to Lord Leighton as a gift." Leighton laughed. "Please, Mors, calling it working together is generous. You needed ingredients, and I had the connections to find them. You did the magic." The four men shared an easy laugh before Brandon's tone shifted, becoming more deliberate. "Lord Leighton," he began, "I've heard from Mors that you've been preparing for what's to come." Leighton blinked, clearly surprised, and turned a questioning look toward Mors. Mors gave a slow nod. "He's been brought in." Understanding dawned in Leighton's eyes. He exhaled, setting his glass down. "Yes, that's true." He leaned back slightly, choosing his words with care. "We have been blessed or burdened by a touch of magic in our blood. My daughter, Malara, began having dreams. Dark dreams, though never clear. For years they tormented her, visions of fire turning to frost, of the world falling silent and dead, and other things she could not describe. In time, those visions hollowed her, and the bright child I once knew became a shadow of herself." Brandon leaned forward, clearly intrigued, while Baelor lowered his gaze, seemingly reliving the memory of those years. Leighton continued, his voice softening. "Then, some years ago, she began to see Mors in those dreams. Everything changed. The cold that crept toward her would retreat whenever he appeared in her dreams. The nightmares lost their hold, and for the first time in years, she found peace. My daughter began to return." His final words trembled slightly, and there was a faint sheen of moisture in his eyes. Brandon's eyes widened. "So she sees visions like the old Targaryen dreamers?" Leighton nodded. "Yes and no. Not prophetic, exactly. More instinct-like. She feels the deathly cold spreading, slowly attaching itself to the world, to people. And when Mors draws near, it fades. It's as though something within him pushes it back. Brandon sat back, silent for a moment, then said softly, "I've learned more about these things in the last 2 weeks than in all my years. So this is what led to your alliance." Leighton nodded again. "You could say that. If what my daughter senses is true, then all mankind will need to stand together. Ideally, we would have faced this as one realm, united against a single threat." He paused, glancing meaningfully at Mors. Mors chuckled, unashamed. "Good father, please. I didn't plan to shatter the realm. How was I to know my overwhelming charisma would inspire half of Westeros to crown itself?" Leighton, Baelor, and Brandon all laughed, though Mors's humor faded into a sigh. "The truth is, I couldn't stay bound to a throne that no longer represented us. Things might have been different if my brother, if Doran had lived. If King's Landing hadn't fallen the way it did." His voice trailed off, the flicker of sadness in his eyes betraying what the words did not. Brandon leaned forward, his tone steady but sympathetic. You did nothing wrong. For both the North and Dorne, independence was the only honest path." He paused, lips twitching with wry amusement. "Still, it does make uniting against what's coming that much harder." Leighton nodded gravely. "That's where the Council of Kings comes in. Convincing my good son, King Mace Tyrell, to host it took no small effort. I had to promise him that by leading the initiative, Mors would finally view him as an equal and perhaps even call him friend." Brandon blinked. "And why in the name of the old gods would he care about that?" Mors groaned, rubbing at his temple. Across the table, Baelor's lips twitched with barely contained amusement as he glanced toward his father, silently urging him to go on. Leighton's lips twitched with mirth. Because Mors utterly humiliated him both in war and, well, physically. Brandon looked between them, confused. "Hey?" Brandon asked eloquently, blinking twice. Leighton couldn't suppress his grin. "Let's just say Mace admires him a little too much, sees Mors as the ideal image of a knightly king from the age of heroes reborn. Ever since learning of my connection to Mors and, by extension, his through Malara's marriage, he's been obsessed with impressing his glorious good brother. Frankly, I've never seen Dornish reach relations this healthy." Mors gave an exaggerated sigh. "The burdens of irresistible charm." Baelor, midsip, nearly choked on his drink, managing to stifle a laugh that came out as a half cough, half spit take. Mors shot him a knowing look, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Brandon, still clearly lost but amused by the exchange, glanced between them with a small grin of his own. Baelor cleared his throat, still red-faced. "My apologies, your graces." Leighton only shook his head, though the smirk never left his face. "Speaking of charm, your decision to return Orphan Maker to House Roxton was wise. It helped cement the idea that peace can truly endure between our two realms." Mors nodded. "It was the right thing to do. We weren't truly enemies, just victims of circumstance." "Indeed," Leighton said. "Now, as for the Reach, Mace can likely be persuaded, but Olenna Tyrell worries me. She's the true power behind the throne. Nothing moves in Highgarden without her blessing. And she only allows them to move if it's in their best interest." Brandon frowned. "I reckon protecting all life in the realm would be in her best interest, wouldn't it?" Mors sighed. "That's the problem. If we tell her that, she'll assume we'll handle it and she needn't bother." Brandon muttered under his breath, "By the old gods, I'll never understand Southern logic." Leighton chuckled warmly. "Few Northerners do. But that's the way of things. The rest of the kingdoms thrive on intrigue and calculation. Not everyone can afford stark honesty." Mors nodded. "He's right, Brandon. I'm not sure how things are in the north, but Dornish politics are ruthless, though I've managed to keep the peace in large part to my brother's efforts and overwhelming strength. Still, the same rules apply when dealing with the other realms. He turned to Leighton. How should we proceed with the reach, then? Will you need my help? Leighton rubbed his brow in thought. Allow me to try first. If things stall, I'll ask for your help. We've already brought in Lords Mathis Rowan and Quentin Roxton, and Lord Pakester Redwine has long been in support, though Olenna's influence is still there. If Mace proves stubborn, we'll turn to Lords Randall Tarley, Leo Ashford and Bennett Fossoway. Together we could form a sizable and influential bloc. But if all else fails? He hesitated. I'll bring in the Florents and their allies. My second wife's father, Lord Alistair, still resents Tyrell rule. By this point the Florents just carry it in their blood, like a family trait. But that move will not please the Queen of Thorns and bring with it much trouble. Mors exhaled slowly. Then I'll trust your judgment, good father. Brandon and I will focus on Prince Hoster Tully and King Denisarin. As for the Lannisters, I'm uncertain. I've had little contact with King Jaime or the Rock. We'll have a chance to gauge them properly at the tourney. And Robert Baratheon. He glanced sideways at Brandon with a knowing look. Well, we've already agreed on how to handle that particular storm. Brandon's grin turned wry. Aye, he said after a beat. We'll try our hand at it when the time comes. I'll bring Eddard up to speed when I return. He's our best path there, given their friendship. And as for the Lannisters. He leaned back, thinking aloud. You've the right of it, Mors. We'll see what we can learn in Highgarden. Baelor, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. We had some dealings with the Rock before King Tywin's death, but then everything just stopped. Father, why don't you share what you know? Leighton sighed, setting his cup down gently. Right. There's little I can tell you about the Lannisters, but what I do know might have been significant. He leaned back, eyes distant. Before King Tywin's passing, Highgarden and I were in quiet discussions with him. He sought to bind the Rock and the Reach through marriage. My grandson Willis was to wed Cersei Lannister, and my daughter Linus, Jaime. He gave a weary shake of his head. Mace could never stop boasting about it, he muttered, his voice tinged with exasperation. But then Tywin died, and the twins. He hesitated, searching for the right words. Married. A long, uneasy silence followed. Brandon broke it. You don't reckon they actually? Mors rubbed his chin, gaze distant, while Leighton took a slow, deliberate sip of his drink. Neither man answered, but the silence spoke louder than words. Baelor shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. Finally, Leighton looked toward the dark window where the beacon's light cut across the night sky. I think we have enough for now. Rest well, my kings. Tomorrow, we ride for Highgarden and begin the first step toward unity. He opened the door and bowed slightly as they exited. Good night, my kings. And King Brandon, welcome to the war for the dawn. Brandon froze for a moment, then nodded firmly. For the dawn. Mors smiled faintly, echoing the words. Yes. For the dawn. Leighton raised his glass once more. For the dawn. Baelor inclined his head solemnly. We shall light the way, for the dawn. Late night the Hightower, Old Town. Mors and Brandon talked while making their way towards the guest wing, accompanied by their guards Sir Barry Stan Selmy for Mors and Sir Roderick Castle for Brandon, with a Hightower servant leading them. Before they reached their chambers, however, the sound of laughter drew their attention to the common hall. Inside, they found a lively scene. At a long table sat Princess Lyanna Stark, Lady Alyria Dane, Lady Linus Hightower, and Prince Benyon Stark, all deeply focused as Lyanna prepared to roll the dice for her turn at race, under the expert supervision of the reigning champion herself, Lady Malara Hightower. Princess, Malara said gravely, you must put your heart into it. Visualize what you want. Then shake, shake, and shake until you feel the number close to your heart and release. Let it all go, and the dice will answer you. Lyanna nodded seriously, muttering under her breath as she copied the chant. Shake, shake, shake then release. Shake, shake, shake then release. She cast the dice. They rolled and clattered, landing exactly where she wanted. Yes. Yes. Look, Malara, I got it, she shouted, leaping from her seat and throwing her arms around her laughing mentor. Across the table, Alyria and Benyon groaned in unison, both face-palming in defeat, while Lena's Hightower gave them a very deliberate, very grown-up eye roll that said she was far too mature for this. Malara, still half laughing, made an exaggerated sniffle. They grow up so quickly, don't they? Mors and Brandon stood at the doorway, watching the chaos with equal parts curiosity and amusement until the unmistakable sound of giggling drew their eyes across the room. On the far side, Queen Ashura Dane, Queen Catelyn Stark, Lady Alyssa Euler, Lady Alice Rowan, and Lady Rhea Florent were drinking Sunfire Reserve and chatting animatedly. Nearby, boards for Sivas, chess, and checkers lay abandoned, a clear sign the games had been replaced by wine and gossip. Even Catelyn, her auburn hair catching the candlelight, looked rosier than usual. The guards kept watch nearby, Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Garth Hightower, and Sir Darrow of Lemonwood among them. Mors leaned toward Brandon, voice low and clearly amused. It seems they've bonded better than we expected. You think your queen will be all right? Any redder and I'd mistake her for a tomato. Brandon chuckled, shaking his head. She'll be fine. I hardly ever see her let loose like this. His expression softened. Still, she's a southerner. She may never truly fit in at Winterfell. Sensing the shift, Mors steered the conversation elsewhere. I'm more surprised to see your brother sitting in this garden of flowers instead of drinking with the men elsewhere. Look at him, completely flustered and trying to catch little Alyria's eye. Though I doubt she's noticed. He laughed, watching as Alyria and Linus exchanged sharp looks. The two girls had clearly developed a rivalry, Alyria finding Linus too prim and polished, Linus finding Alyria far too tomboyish. Poor Benyon had no chance of winning anyone's attention. Brandon's lips twitched. Regardless, this is good. I reckon it'll help him see there's more to life than the wall. I'd say the plan's half succeeded already. At that moment, Malara spotted them and hurried over, nearly skipping. Mors, she corrected quickly, muttering under her breath, can't be too casual, can't be too casual. She reached them and hugged Mors before turning to Brandon with a radiant smile. Mors, King Brandon, why don't you join us? Mors grinned. Sure, we can play for a bit. Across the room, the ladies had also noticed their arrival, and Mors couldn't miss the fiery look Queen Catelyn sent her husband's way. Oh, he thought with amusement, it seems Brandon won't be sleeping much tonight. Perhaps another wolf cub soon. Just then, Baelor Hightower appeared at the doorway. Ah, there you are, Alice. I didn't see you in our chambers and came to check. It seems you've all been enjoying yourselves. Alice smiled politely. Yes, my lord husband. It's been lovely spending time with the ladies and with their graces. Mors, taking Benyon's vacated seat as the young man retreated in defeat, added with an easy smile, then you'll have plenty more chances as we make our way to the tourney. He joined the table, laughing and rolling dice alongside the girls, while Brandon and Baelor settled near the women, though Mors couldn't help noticing the curious, lingering glances young Linus kept sending his way. Gods, he thought, half amused, half resigned, does she have a crush on me? She should be playing with dolls, not making eyes at kings. And so the night passed in warmth and laughter, the three great houses sharing food, drink, and good company until at last, they all retired to rest and prepare for the journey ahead at dawn. Later that night, as Mors and Ashura lay together beneath the soft lantern glow, she shifted against him, her voice thoughtful. Sonny, she began quietly, today the boys were playing knights. It started as fun, just wooden swords and laughter, but then it turned into a scuffle. That in itself isn't the problem, but, little Durin overpowered Lord Leighton's youngest, Humphrey. He's 4 years older, Mors. She hesitated, worry creeping into her tone. We can pass it off as luck for now, but as he grows, I'm afraid people will start to notice. Mors, who had been smiling faintly as she spoke, grew solemn. He said nothing for a long moment, his eyes distant in thought. Yes, he said finally, his voice low. It's bound to become a problem. Durin's too young to understand the danger of showing what he can do. All our children will face this, one way or another. Ashura hugged him, resting her head on his chest. Do you think we should send him back? She asked softly. He's safe here, but at Highgarden, with the eyes of most of the kingdoms watching. She didn't finish the thought. Mors nodded slowly. We'll consider it. Worst case, Oberyn's taking the land route through the Prince's Pass. He could escort Durin back if it comes to that. But I don't think it's serious enough yet. Ashura looked up at him. How did you ever manage to hide it at that age? Mors smiled faintly. I didn't have it at that age. It came after my fall from the sand steed at the Water Gardens when Oberyn and I were racing. I was 10. What our children face will be different entirely. From what I've seen, the aura they've inherited and the one you, Malara, and Alyssa carry from bearing them is much weaker in scale, though that could change. I'll need to observe more. Ashura considered this, then smiled mischievously. Still, it's remarkable. I gained power simply by carrying your child. And since I've had 2. She gave him a playful look. I'm stronger than Malara and Alyssa now. So tell me, my son, if I have many little sonnies, do you think I might finally outmatch you? Mors chuckled softly, pulling her closer. I suppose we can find out, he murmured before kissing her tenderly. Just as the moment deepened, a knock sounded at the door. Morsi, I can't sleep. I'm coming in. They broke apart with an exasperated laugh. Ashura called out, come in, sister. The door creaked open, revealing Malara dragging a reluctant, red-faced Alyssa by the wrist. Alyssa, catching Mors and Ashura's amused smiles, stammered quickly, I didn't want to disturb anyone, but Malara insisted. Malara rolled her eyes. Right, right. Says the one who was just talking about how she likes to ride Mors like a. Alyssa clapped a hand over her mouth, cheeks blazing. Don't you dare finish that. Even her darker shade of skin couldn't hide the flush that crept up her neck. Mors and Ashura both burst into laughter. It's surprising you can still be so shy, Mors teased lightly, considering how close we all are. He patted the bed with a grin. Come on, the bed's big enough for everyone. Nothing more happened that night, but the warmth they shared beneath the covers was enough to remind them of how deep their bond truly ran. Chapter 60, Chapter LV, The Bloom Beneath the Sun. The Chronicles of the New Age of Kings. Excerpt from Chapter 18, The Accord of Highgarden. When the Sun of Dorne rode through the gardens of the Reach, even roses bent toward his light. His warmth stirred the valley, his presence turned the fields to gold, and for a fleeting season, beauty and power walked side by side. Yet every bloom that opens beneath the sun must also learn its shadow, for even the brightest light cannot banish the dusk forever. By Archmaester Thalen of Old Town, written circa 316 AC. Reflecting on the Highgarden Council of Kings of 284 AC, when peace bloomed once more beneath the light of the Sun of Dorne. Mid-late 284 AC, Highgarden, Kingdom of the Reach. After 2 weeks of leisurely travel with several pleasant stops along the way, the Martell Stark Hightower host finally reached the Valley of the Mandar, where Highgarden was located. The valley glowed gold beneath the afternoon sun. As the host descended along the winding road, the air grew thick with the scent of roses. Bees hummed over wild blooms, and far ahead, the towers of Highgarden shimmered in pale green and white marble, their walls draped in flowering vines that glowed like living banners. But that wasn't all they could see. Even from a distance, the sight was striking. Hundreds of tents surrounded the castle with their colorful and diverse standards flighting in the wind, spreading across the fields like a living tapestry of color. Each encampment had been carefully arranged so that lords and banners from the different kingdoms were grouped together, reducing the chance of old tempers flaring. Highgarden's guards patrolled steadily through the common areas, keeping a quiet order amid the growing crowd. The fields outside the city were alive with sound and motion. Merchants had set up countless stalls, selling food, wine, and trinkets from every corner of Westeros. Knights and squires sparred in open spaces, the clang of steel ringing in the warm air. Children played at being knights, chasing one another with wooden swords and painted shields. It was a scene of vivid life, one that seemed to celebrate the peace that had returned after years of war. Above it all, the sky was clear and bright, the afternoon sun spilling gold across the land. Highgarden's famed flowers stretched in every direction, their colors glowing under the light. The tourney grounds had been chosen with care to preserve the gardens and greenery around the castle, so that the city's beauty framed the celebration rather than being trampled by it. With the scent of roses in the air and banners rippling in every hue imaginable, it was certain this would be the most radiant and colorful tourney Westeros had seen in a generation. As the Martell carriage rolled past a group of children playing by the roadside, the passengers couldn't help but overhear a scene that brought laughter to the ladies inside. "You think you can defeat me, evil dragon? For I am King Mors, the dragon of the south, the Sun of Dorne, champion of the Seven, and today I shall channel the warrior to end your tyranny," declared a slightly chubby boy, standing tall with a stick raised like a sword. "Ha! Dream on! The evil dragon has ruled these lands forever. You'll never free my slaves. Today, I'll show you my power," another boy shouted, baring his teeth in mock rage. The two charged and began clashing with wooden sticks while the rest of their friends joined in, laughing and striking wildly at one another. Ashura chuckled, her violet eyes gleaming. "Oh, look at that! The great King Mors has admirers everywhere. As expected of you, Sonny, the dragon of the south, Son of Dorne, champion of the Seven." Her smile was almost blinding. Durin's eyes lit up. "Wow! Father's so famous. He's the dragon of the south." Malara, laughing behind her hand, added dramatically, "The storytelling was passable, but the actors? Terrible. No commitment to the source material whatsoever. And why is King Mors being played by the chubby one? I swear, there's no respect for accuracy in these productions." Alyssa, trying and failing to suppress her laughter, joined in. "Quite right. Their swordplay was dreadful too. No form, no discipline." Mors shook his head, smiling despite himself. Ignoring their banter, he leaned toward his son. "I am a little famous, Durin," he said with mock gravity. "But when you're older, I'll tell you the real story. For now, focus on your studies." Then, lowering his voice in a conspiratorial whisper, he added, "And when you grow up and learn enough and get stronger, maybe they'll make stories about you, too." He ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. Durin's eyes widened in surprise, his face glowing. "I can? Then I'll work hard, father." Mors laughed softly, joined by the others in the carriage, as the road ahead stretched on beneath the golden reach sun. As the Martell Stark host approached the gates of Highgarden, a welcoming line awaited them. At its center stood King Mace Tyrell, radiant in gold-threaded armor that strained slightly at the belly. A velvet cloak embroidered with 100 roses trailed behind him, and his chest swelled as if he himself had planted the sun in the sky. At his side stood Queen Aelri Hightower, Malara's younger sister, poised and luminous in her composure. Their 4 children stood beside them in careful order, the 2 smallest cradled by nurses. Just behind them, Lady Olenna Redwine, the Queen Mother, watched with an expression sharp enough to prune the hedges herself. When the Martell Stark Hightower host dismounted, Lord Leighton Hightower stepped forward, bowing before the Tyrell king. "Your Grace," Leighton said with stately calm, "I have fulfilled my duty. I present to you King Mors Martell and King Brandon Stark, with their families. Mace waved a hand dismissively, laughing. Ah, good father, none of that. It was merely a favor I asked of you. Thank you, thank you. He turned then to Mors, beaming. My good brother, King Mors. How glad I am to see you again after so long. We are delighted to host you in Highgarden. Before Mors could reply, Mace pivoted to Brandon. And King Brandon. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. I'm sure even you must be glad to be away from that dreadfully cold wasteland you call the North. We'll see to it you're properly warmed here in Highgarden. A silence followed. Brandon's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and several of his men exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to frown or laugh. Mors resisted a deep sigh. 7 save us! He thought. He had an almost physical urge to drag his palm down his face, but he held himself back. Others, however, were not so disciplined. PFT ha 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 ow HMPF sorry, Malara suddenly burst out laughing. Alyssa immediately pinched her waist, forcing her back into composure. I just remembered, Malara blurted quickly, that chickens can't fly and found it terribly funny. PFT ha 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 HMPF pardon me. Princess Lioness Stark followed, stifling her own laugh. I also realized what Lady Malara said was funny and simply couldn't contain myself. Olena's voice cut through before Mace could recover. Mace! Stop making a fool of yourself. You've just insulted the North. Her tone left no room for argument. Turning smoothly toward Mors and Brandon, she added with flawless diplomacy, Your Majesties, welcome to Highgarden. We trust your stay will be pleasant and that your Council of Kings brings forth proper understanding between our realms. Mace blinked, baffled. Making a fool of myself? What did I say? He muttered under his breath. I was only trying to help the Northerners warm up after escaping that dreadfully cold place. He shook his head, still lost. I can never understand what Mother's talking about. Queen Aelri, with a composed smile that betrayed years of practice, gently cooed, It's all right, my king. I'm sure everyone knows what you meant. Seeing the awkwardness stretch, Leighton stepped forward smoothly. Your Grace, he said, perhaps you might continue the introductions. Our royal guests have yet to meet your beautiful children. Mace brightened at once, puffing up like a peacock. Ah, yes, of course. These here are my children, each as beautiful as their mother, and, well, perhaps a little of me too. He gestured proudly. From eldest to youngest, Willis, 8, Garland, 7, and the little ones, Loras and Marjorie 2 and 1. And look at her. Is she not the most beautiful babe in the realm? Mark my words, she'll be a queen one day, just like her mother. Mors managed a diplomatic smile. Ah, quite beautiful indeed. Our niece is a sight to behold. You and Queen Aelri have been blessed with fine children, King Mace. Brandon, having regained his composure with Catelyn's subtle touch at his sleeve, nodded in agreement. Aye, that's right, King Mace, Queen Aelri, you have beautiful children. Mors continued the introductions with calm grace. Then allow me to present my family. Through my queen, Ashura Dane our eldest, the young sun dragon, Durin, 4, and our daughter Serena, 1. From Lady Alyssa Euler, Lorza, 2. And from Lady Malara Hightower, little Luna, 1. Aelri's eyes lit warmly as she spotted Luna in her sister's arms. I'm so happy for you, sister, she said softly, embracing Malara and leaning close to admire the babe. Brandon followed with a smile of pride. And this, he said, motioning to the child by his side, is my little wolf cub Ricard Stark, too. Polite laughter and words of blessing followed as introductions continued among the families and lords. At last, Mace clapped his hands together. Now then, let us retreat from the heat. I've arranged a small feast to welcome our noble guests. Brandon inclined his head politely but refused. You have our thanks, King Mace, but I must first see to my men and meet with the northern contingent. Mace looked mildly disappointed but recovered quickly, turning his attention to Mors and the high towers. Then the honor falls to you, King Mors, and to you, good Lord Leighton. Come, let us dine. They followed him into the marble halls, sunlight glinting on the golden vines carved into the door frames. The air inside was cool and fragrant with lilies. Throughout the meal, Mors caught Lady Olenna watching him from across the table, her eyes sharp, assessing, but not hostile. She spoke little, merely listened, her fingers tapping lightly on her cup as if counting the beats of every word spoken around her. He wasn't sure whether she found him interesting or dangerous. Either way, he knew one truth about the Queen of Thorns. Attention from her was never a good thing. Almost 3 hours later, the small feast drew to a close. The guests had eaten their fill of honey-glazed pheasant, sugared fruits, and arbor wine, and polite exhaustion now hung over the table. Mors set down his cup and rose with practiced grace. King Mace, I thank you for your hospitality. I'll go and meet my brother and the Dornish host who should have already arrived by way of the Prince's Pass. We can continue our talks later. They have been, enlightening. He added the last word with a forced smile. Mace laughed delightedly, his cheeks already flushed from drink. Ha ha ha. Good, good. I'm glad you found them enlightening. Yes, yes, you must come back later. I have a cask of vintage wine I'm sure you'll enjoy. Then he leaned in conspiratorially, or tried to. His whisper carried across the entire table. And when you return, I can show you some of the other treasures we have here. It's not only the Dornish who know how to have fun, He ended with a laugh and a nudge, the innuendo as subtle as a warhorn. Lady Olenna quite literally pressed a hand to her face. Mors's eye twitched uncontrollably. Right. Yes. Thanks. We'll be going now. He turned to Queen Aelry, offering a sympathetic half smile. We will be seeing you soon, Queen Aelry. I'm sure Malara would love to spend some time with you. Malara smirked. Yes, little sister, don't worry, I'll come rescue you from. Alyssa quickly clamped a hand over her mouth. Thank you for your hospitality, she said through a strained, polite smile. Ashura stepped forward with effortless poise, her laugh light and melodic. It has been an absolute delight to visit the Reach. I'll make sure my royal husband finds the time to grace your presence again soon. Thank you once more for the meal. Lord Leighton stood and inclined his head. King Mors, Queen Ashura, my family, we've enjoyed our time together. I'll remain here a while with my liege. Do not hesitate to seek me out should you need anything. Mors smiled warmly. Of course, thank you, good father. Bye, Daddy. Malara waved cheerfully, bouncing Luna in her arms as they turned to leave. They made it only a few paces before a sharp exchange drifted faintly from behind them. Ow! Mother, why did you hit me? Mace's voice whined. Because you're an oaf, you oaf. How could you? Olenna's voice faded as they moved further down the corridor. Ashura pressed her lips together, failing to hide her amusement. Well, she murmured, that was something. As if waiting for permission, the entire group burst into laughter, relieved, shared, and thoroughly deserved. Some time later, they arrived at the Dornish section of the tourney grounds. The air was alive with familiar energy, tents still being raised, laughter echoing through the camp, the rhythmic clatter of sparring spears, and bursts of music from somewhere deep within. Dornish men and women moved about with effortless purpose, some worked, some drank, some danced. Yet whenever they caught sight of King Mors, activity paused. Soldiers, servants, even the drunker knights all stopped whatever they were doing to bow or salute before carrying on. 3 men in the midst of a drunken fight froze mid-punch, straightened, and dipped their heads as Mors passed, then immediately resumed their scuffle the moment he was beyond earshot, drawing soft smiles from Ashura and the others. Malara accompanied Alyssa to the Euler tents, with young Durin walking happily at their side. Behind them, the servants trailed after Mors and Ashura toward the main pavilion, cradling the sleeping infants to be settled in for the night. At the heart of the encampment stood a large, beautifully decorated pavilion, their main tent, embroidered with the sun and spear of House Martell. In front of it, two figures trained in the open space, Prince Oberyn Martell, shirtless and gleaming with sweat, and a young boy mirroring his movements with a smaller spear in hand. When Oberyn noticed the approaching host, he lowered his weapon and broke into a grin. "Brother," he called. "It's about time. I was beginning to think you'd stop to seduce every flower in the Reach. Since you were taking your sweet time, I decided to train Maron instead. The boy's got my gift for the spear. 7 help us, let's hope he also inherits my taste for the finer things in life." The 8-year-old Maron San turned crimson at the remark but quickly straightened and offered a proper bow. "Hello, royal uncle. I hope you had a pleasant trip." Ashura immediately stepped forward, unable to resist. She cupped his cheeks fondly. "Oh, look at him, so proper. You're absolutely adorable." Mors chuckled, shaking his head. "Ha ha ha, yes, he is. And to answer your question, little man, yes, the trip was pleasant. How was yours, nephew?" Maron, still flustered by Ashura's attention, managed a shy smile. "It was good, uncle. A bit boring, but I got to spar with father and Uncle Manfredi on the road." Mors raised a brow, intrigued. "Manfredi came with you?" He turned to Oberyn. Oberyn smirked. "That's right. After sailing to the Stoneway, I convinced him to join me. We left Jane and the children with her father, Lord Franklin, at the Skerriech in the Prince's Pass, and arrived here yesterday." Mors smiled in approval. "Good. Then after Ashura and I get settled inside, I'll join you for Mayron's training. The boy has real potential." He glanced around. "Is Manfredi here?" Oberyn grinned. "That's great. Maron enjoys learning from his uncle." As for Manfredi, he went off to explore the common grounds with Bedwick. Then his expression shifted, eyes sparkling with mischief. "By the way, part of the reason he came was because he had to flee for a while." Mors and Ashura exchanged a puzzled look. "Flee?" Mors asked. "Flee from what? Was he in danger?" Oberyn's grin widened. "Oh yes. Mortal danger. Had he stayed, he might have been thrown off Skerriech by his wife herself. Ha ha ha." Mors groaned, realizing it wasn't danger at all but gossip. "7 save me, Oberyn. Stop sounding like one of those gossipy old ladies and just tell me what happened." Ashura chuckled softly, amused by the byplay. Oberyn drew it out on purpose. "Well, it seems our dear cousin Manfredi wasn't satisfied with just one of the twins." He let the words hang dramatically. Mors's eyes went wide. "No. It can't be. Don't tell me, did our dear cousin really?" Ashura shook her head, laughing at the two grown men gossiping like tavern girls. Oberyn leaned in theatrically. "That's not all." His voice dropped to a mock whisper. "Jane's twin sister, Jen Ellen, is pregnant." Ha ha ha. Mors and Ashura both covered their mouths in disbelief before Mors burst out laughing. "No. By the gods. I see, I see. I'll have to have a word or two with that playboy." Oberyn and Maron exchanged matching grins, clearly plotting something. They didn't need to say it. Manfredi's life would not be peaceful for the next few days. Then came the innocent voice of Maron. "Father, what did Uncle Manfredi do with Aunt Jane's twin sister?" Oberyn smirked, eyes glinting with wicked amusement. "Well, little Maron, your Uncle Manfredi decided he didn't have enough meat to eat, so he..." "Oberyn." The single word from Mors carried quiet command. Oberyn rolled his eyes. "Fine, fine." He ruffled Mayron's hair instead. "Don't worry about it, little spear. You'll understand when you're older." "Father." "Not the hair again." Maron protested, batting his hand away. Oberyn laughed. Ah, so there's still fight in you. Good. Let's continue training. Do well, and your Uncle Mors will join us soon. Yes, father. I'll do my best. That's my little spear. Come. Oberyn barked joyfully, lowering into a stance as the boy mirrored him. Mors and Ashura exchanged weary but fond looks, the kind only siblings and spouses could share after years of Oberyn's chaos. Then, still smiling, they turned toward the pavilion to finally get settled inside. 3 days later. The Martell host had spent the last 3 days exploring Highgarden in full splendor, walking its sunlit terraces, visiting the bustling market stalls, and meeting the many lords who had gathered for the grand tourney. And, of course, teasing the life out of Manfredi. Though the matter was treated with humor among family, it was still a delicate scandal involving 2 of the major houses of the realm. Mors had handled it with measured grace, sending a raven to Skerech with a formal apology to Lord Franklin Fowler and Jen Ellen Fowler on behalf of both Manfredi and House Martell, promising to address the matter properly upon his return to Dorne. Now, under the bright Reach sun, King Mors Martell walked alongside King Dennisaren through the common grounds of the tourney. Behind them, Queen Ashura Dane strolled arm in arm with Queen Alyssa Waynwood, their quiet conversation occasionally breaking into laughter. Trailing a few paces further back were Alyria Dane, Linus Hightower, Lioness Stark, Benyon Stark, and Benyon's friend and personal guard trainee, Valder, a lad of 14 who already stood 6.5 feet tall, 196 centimeters, and weighed near 280 pounds. His sheer size made him look older than Mors himself, and his easy grin drew attention wherever he went. Around them, their guards maintained a careful formation: Sir Barry Stan Selmy, Sir Arthur Dane, and a mix of Dornish, Vale, and Northern Knights keeping a vigilant eye on the crowd. They had already met the day before with King Brandon Stark, discussing the darker threats stirring beyond the wall, omens that pointed toward a war unlike any before. At first, King Dennisaren had doubted the tales of shadows and cold death in the far north, but Mors's conviction and the quiet authority with which he spoke of what was coming had finally persuaded him. By the end of their meeting, the King of the Vale had agreed, if the War of the Dawn was truly approaching, then the Vale would stand beside the North and Dorne when the time came, thus cementing a new alliance born of shared purpose. Now, as they walked past a line of colorful tents, the air hummed with life. The wind carried the clash of steel and bursts of laughter from the lists beyond where people were preparing for the tourney. Dennis spoke first, his tone thoughtful. "There's no harm in preparation," he said, echoing their talk from the day before. "And if Brandon truly intends to restore the wall's strength, we must take a more active role." Mors nodded easily. "That's right. The Night's Watch is our first line of defense. They need the right sort of men there, not just the ones the realm throws away." Dennis agreed. "If the Watch is to stand again, it will need more than criminals and outcasts. It must be seen as a calling, chivalry's purest test." "That was exactly our thought," Mors said approvingly. "It has to become a sacred duty again, not a punishment. If we make the North proud of it, perhaps the South will follow." They walked in silence for a while, watching children chase one another through the grass as merchants called out their wares nearby. Finally, Dennis said, "I'll push to restore its honor as much as I can within the Vale. We hold chivalry and honor as our highest calling. Many second and third sons may be willing to take the black if they see it as a path of virtue and honor, instead of exile and disgrace." Mors considered that, sunlight glinting in his violet eyes. "True, it might be harder in Dorne, but I'll push for the same. We all need the Watch to stand." They paused as a group of mummers began performing nearby, drawing cheers from the crowd. Mors glanced back and couldn't help but smile at the sight of Alyria, Lyanna, and Linus laughing together, their mirth momentarily softening the day's solemn thoughts. Dennis leaned closer, his voice low and resolute. "When you go to the wall in a year's time, I'll join you. Perhaps by then I'll have gathered a batch of men from the Vale to accompany us. I want my people to see that I'm serious about this." Mors's eyes widened, a genuine spark of excitement lighting his face. Excellent. Then in a year we... Lyanna, my queen. The familiar booming voice cracked through the hum of the market like thunder over calm water. Conversation died, movement halted. Mors's face froze mid-speech. He closed his eyes briefly and exhaled through his nose. 7 Save us, the storm has arrived. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.